Hey dreamer, tonight we're stepping into a Victorian survival marathon. 3 elegant social events that look graceful from a distance, but up close feel like a high-stakes performance where your greatest enemy is your own elbow. First, you'll attend a Victorian tea party, a world of tiny sandwiches, terrifying politeness, and cups so delicate you're afraid to blink near them. One wrong stir and you've committed a social crime. Then we'll take a seat at a Victorian dinner party, the bigger, longer, more exhausting version, where the table is a battlefield of cutlery, courses arrive like clockwork, and you're expected to eat, converse, and exist like you were raised by a rulebook. And finally we'll end the night at a Victorian ball, an evening of chandeliers, gloves, gossip and dancing until your feet quietly file a formal complaint. It's romance, glamour and pure stamina disguised as culture. So before we lace up our corsets and pretend we know what to do with 5 different forks, take a second to like this video and subscribe, or double check if you are already subscribed. It helps the channel more than you think. And leave a comment telling me where you're listening from, and what history era you want to survive next. Now, dim the lights, and enjoy being comfortable, because the Victorian era had manners, rules, and plenty of drama, but comfort, not so much. Good luck. Getting ready for a Victorian tea party is not unlike preparing for battle. First you need armour, several layers of it. Chemise, corset, corset cover, petticoats, bustle, skirt, bodice, gloves, boots, bonnet, parasol. Your spine is compromised by 9 a.m. and your bladder declared independence an hour ago. Comfort is a weakness. The goal is to look effortless while slowly suffocating from lace. You begin with the chemise, the only layer that makes you even vaguely remember what cotton feels like. It is soft, functional, and absolutely forbidden to be seen by anyone except your maid. Over that goes the corset, which requires teamwork and a vague death wish. Your maid pulls the laces tight while you clutch the bedpost and think about your sins. With each tug, your organs shift upward like overstuffed luggage. Breathing becomes a strategic decision. Sneezing is no longer an option. If you yawn, you risk structural damage. Then comes the corset cover, not for modesty. No, it is there to stop the corset from shredding your bodice like an angry cheese grater. Its job is to reduce friction and judgment. The petticoats follow. At least 3, preferably 4. They rustle when you move and trap heat like you are secretly smuggling a radiator. One is starched, one is flounced, one may be cursed. All are vital. If your petticoats are limp, people will assume your morals are too. They are also a defense mechanism against cold benches and direct eye contact with your own thighs. Next, the bustle. A small wire shelf you strap to your rear like a polite exoskeleton. Its purpose is to make your behind look fashionably improbable, like you sat on a tea tray and decided to keep it. It can also double as actual furniture if you stand still long enough. Then comes the skirt, made of a fabric heavy enough to influence your posture. It fastens at the waist and immediately begins a quiet campaign against your knees. Walking becomes something you do with your ankles only. Do not trip. You will not get up. The bodice is next. It buttons up the back, always by someone who secretly resents you, like a cousin or a maid who's seen your laundry. The sleeves are snug. The neckline is ambiguous. The seams are judgmental. It is tight, rigid, and constructed to encourage perfect posture or spinal collapse. There is no in-between. You shift slightly and hear something crack. You pray it was the bodice. Gloves are next. You must put them on now, before the bonnet, because once the bonnet is secured, Your arms lose 60% of their range of motion. Victorian gloves are not functional. They are delicate hand prisons. The buttons are microscopic. The thread is made of lies. You fasten each one with a tool called a glove hook, and the kind of patience normally reserved for watchmakers and saints. You briefly consider cutting off your hands instead. Then the boots, ankle high, buttoned and designed by someone who hated women and archers. The leather is stiff, the soles are thin, and the buttons require another gadget to close. The heels are short but sharp, like the hostess you're trying to impress. Your feet are already swelling, but you must ignore them. Pain is elegant. The bonnet goes on last, tied under the chin with a ribbon that will haunt your dreams. It must be large enough to suggest wealth, but not so large that you resemble an emotionally unstable mushroom. Flowers are acceptable. Feathers are dangerous. Veils are mysterious but imply scandal. You position it carefully, angle your face and stare into the mirror. The reflection does not show a woman. It shows a sculpture made of cotton, bone, silk, and restraint. Your waist is now the circumference of a soup can. Your arms have the mobility of a poorly engineered puppet. Your bladder is already demanding answers, and yet you smile. Because this is the look. This is elegance. This is how you prove you are refined enough to eat dry cake with strangers. You gather your parasol, not for sun, for status. You step toward the door in slow, precise movements. Too fast and you will faint. Too slow and you will be late. A bead of sweat escapes your hairline. You ignore it. Ladies do not perspire, they glisten. Your maid opens the door. The air is cool, your breath is shallow, and the corset creaks like a haunted staircase. You are now dressed for tea, and possibly your own funeral. Your carriage is waiting for you. You travel by carriage because walking suggests poverty. The journey is short but filled with social anxiety, the scent of over-polished leather, and the unshakable fear that your hem is wrinkling in real time. Your driver smells like regret. The horse judges you. You clutch your calling card like a life preserver. You are seated awkwardly upright, perched on a velvet bench that was not designed for comfort but for posture enforcement. The carriage rocks with every uneven cobblestone, jostling your spine and shaking your pinned-up hair like a decorative salad. Outside, the streets are a parade of puddles, fog, and people you are trying very hard not to relate to. You pass a chimney sweep, a vegetable cart, and a woman shouting about radishes. You look away. They are not invited to tea. They have freedom. Inside the carriage it is silent except for the occasional squeak of leather, the muttered curses of the driver, and the faint groan of wood protesting under the weight of expectations. The windows are fogged from your own terrified breath. You wipe one with your gloved finger, leaving a mark that feels too personal. You immediately pretend it was condensation and not evidence of your existence. The calling card in your hand is pristine, embossed with your name, your address, and absolutely no personality. It is meant to say, I am respectable, and not, I cried while threading a shoe button this morning. You tuck it into your glove carefully. Losing it would be social death. Arriving without a calling card is the equivalent of showing up naked and asking to borrow the sugar tongs. Your dress shifts with the motion of the carriage. You can feel your bustle adjusting itself independently, like a dog trying to get comfortable. Your corset creaks slightly. You hope no one hears it, not even the horse. You inhale, shallow and strategic. Deep breaths are for peasants and the dead. The driver coughs again, loudly, possibly on purpose. His top hat is tilted, battered, and somehow expresses contempt. You wonder if he was trained to do that. If drivers are selected for their ability to silently criticize the very people who hired them. The horse snorts, which feels personal. It is a small grey with judgment in its eyes and the gait of a disappointed teacher. You pass by other carriages, some more elegant than yours, some far worse. One glides by, pulled by matching chestnuts and driven by a man in clean gloves. You look away before you are forced to confront your own upholstery. The social hierarchy of carriages is its own terrifying game. Yours is respectable, not flashy, not cheap, just enough polish to say you belong, not enough to say you're trying. The streets narrow, the fog thickens. You recognize the gas lamps flickering outside your destination. The house looms ahead, a looming structure of brick and expectation. You can already see the other carriages lining the street like vultures dressed for dinner. You're almost there. You sit up straighter. You smooth your gloves. You regret everything. The driver pulls to a stop. This sudden stillness feels suspicious. You hear footsteps. The footman. Your door will open at any moment. You are not ready. You are never ready. You are about to exit a box on wheels and walk directly into a parlour full of women who can destroy reputations with a sentence about someone's fringe. The carriage door opens, light spills in. So does cold air, scented with soot and judgment. The footman offers a hand. You hesitate, not out of pride, but because your skirt may or may not cooperate. You gather the fabric like a parachute and attempt to descend with grace. One boot touches the pavement, then the other. You are standing. The horse snorts again. The driver mutters something that sounds like good luck but might be a curse. You nod politely. You do not thank him. You are a lady. You face the house. The windows glow softly. Your calling card is tucked firmly in your glove. Your expression is neutral and your bladder is full. The tea party begins now. You are not entering a house. You are entering a test chamber lined with ferns, mirrors, and silent judgment. The hallway smells faintly of beeswax, lilies, and effort. Somewhere a grandfather clock ticks with disapproval. Every footstep on the polished floor feels like an announcement. You try to walk as if you're not painfully aware of your own feet. You float, or at least you attempt to. In reality, your ankles are screaming and your boots are engaging in slow sabotage. The footman takes your name and disappears into the drawing room to announce you, giving everyone inside a solid 30 seconds to form an opinion about you before they even see you. This is your warning bell. You smooth your bodice. You adjust your gloves. You try to remember how to look approachable but mysterious, confident but not smug, charming but not desperate. There is no correct answer, only consequences. A maid offers to take your gloves. You decline with a smile because once your gloves come off, you are vulnerable. Everyone can see your fingers, and Victorians are terrifying about fingers. You keep them on, white and pristine. A thin barrier between you and exposure. You feel like a mannequin with opinions. No one has heard them. You hope they never will. The drawing room looms ahead, filled with low murmurs and high expectations. The light is just dim enough to be flattering but bright enough to highlight the dust on your hem. You hover just outside the threshold, waiting to be introduced. It is not a casual entrance. It is a reveal. A soft gasp, a turn of heads, a chorus of internal critiques disguised as polite smiles. You brace yourself. The butler returns. He announces your name with the same energy one might use to introduce a side dish at a royal banquet. It echoes slightly. Your name, once so familiar now feels foreign and ambitious. You nod and enter. Do not trip. Do not blink too fast. Do not make eye contact with the taxidermy pheasant on the wall. He looks smug. You are now a coat rack with eyebrows. You are not here to speak. You are here to wear fabric in the right order and react to compliments as though they are not weapons. Several heads turn. One woman smiles at you with the warmth of a candle in a blizzard. Another raises a single eyebrow and then returns to her teacup like it contains secrets. The hostess glides toward you. Her gown is made of satin and menace. She kisses the air near your cheek and murmurs something about how delightful it is to see you. You both know this is false. She gestures vaguely toward the seating area, as if granting you permission to exist nearby. You thank her. She has already forgotten you. The room is filled with women like you. Perfect posture, hollow laughter, slightly trembling teacups. The men are few and strategically placed like decorative statues. Everyone is pretending to enjoy themselves. No one is relaxed. The hostess floats from group to group, trailing perfume and power. She occasionally says something that sounds like a compliment but is shaped like a trap. You smile. You nod. You blink at the appropriate intervals. You are seen. You are scanned. You are filed away. For the next 2 hours you will be evaluated on your fabric, your tone, your volume, and your proximity to the pastry tray. There is no assigned seating. There is implied seating, which is worse. You hover awkwardly near the second-best settee, trying to look relaxed while mentally calculating the social hierarchy of everyone else in the room. Sit too soon, and you are overeager. Stand too long, and you are weird. Choose wisely. The second-best settee has already been claimed by a woman with a hat shaped like a regrettable pastry, and a gaze that says she knows your mother's maiden name. The armchair by the fireplace is occupied by a gentleman with sideburns so wide they have their own opinions. The window seat is open, but angled just enough to suggest that only the hostess's favourite can sit there without social consequences. You are left scanning the perimeter like a nervous deer in a room full of predatory florals. Every piece of furniture in this parlour carries centuries of passive-aggressive energy. The floral sofa near the harp looks inviting, but choosing it implies that you believe yourself musical or worse, whimsical. The narrow-backed chair near the refreshment table says, "I'm here for the scones and nothing more." There is a small bench under a painting of a horse. That bench is for widows or people in disgrace. You're not quite ready to be either. Eventually you make a choice. A low, cushioned chair with a slight wobble but neutral placement. It is neither ambitious nor pathetic. It is Switzerland in the form of upholstery. You begin the descent, carefully managing the volume of your skirts. The goal is to sit without announcing it to the room. You succeed. Barely. A soft sigh escapes your lips. You pretend it was the chair. Now you must arrange yourself. Ankles tucked just so. Back straight. Hands folded loosely on your lap as if you were born to place them there. Your left hand rests on top. Too dominant. You switch. Now it looks too rehearsed. You switch again. It is hopeless. Someone across the room is watching. You panic and reach for your teacup, which you do not have yet. You pretend to be adjusting your sleeve instead. A maid begins circulating with the tray. This moment matters. You must accept the teacup with elegance. Grip the saucer like it contains the fate of nations. Do not reach too quickly. That implies desperation. Do not hesitate too long. That implies fear. The woman to your left takes hers effortlessly. Of course she does. She's wearing lilac, the colour of social ease. You nod politely. She nods back, expressionless. It is a duel disguised as courtesy. Now the real performance begins. The room is settling into conversational clusters. You're expected to merge gently into one, not interrupt, not hover, blend, like cream in tea. You listen for an opening. Someone is discussing a cousin's unfortunate embroidery. Safe. Someone else is recounting a dream they had about the Queen. Risky. You opt for the embroidery. You lean forward slightly, just enough to signal participation, not enough to wrinkle your bodice. You offer a small, non-threatening comment about your own sampler work. No one laughs, but they nod. Success. The woman in lilac tilts her head and asks about your stitches. It is both a compliment and a test. You name 2 types of stitch confidently. You invent a third. No one challenges you. The moment passes. You're still afloat. Across the room, someone laughs a little too loudly. Heads turn. A subtle collective note is made. That person will be discussed later. You avoid making eye contact. You look at a framed portrait as if it contains wisdom. It does not. It is a pug in a cravat. You wonder briefly if it had to navigate this same maze of unspoken rules. You settle into your chair with a little more confidence now. You are not the most admired guest, but you are not the strangest either. In the Victorian social jungle, that is survival. You have chosen the correct chair, you are in the correct posture, and for now you are safe, until someone mentions marriage. Then the real bloodbath begins. The tea table looks delicate, but it's armed. Tiered trays of questionable sandwiches, biscuits dry enough to cauterize wounds, and a teapot that may or may not be judging your handshake strength. You pretend to be at ease while desperately watching the hostess to see if it's time to eat. It never is. You inch closer to the table, not directly of course, but by slowly repositioning your knees in the general direction of sustenance. The tablecloth is lace, starched within an inch of its life, with a pattern that might be floral or might be a warning. Everything on the table is perfectly arranged. The sandwiches are stacked in shapes that defy logic. The cakes glisten ominously. There is a jelly moulded into something that looks like a Victorian hat. You are hungry, but more importantly, you are terrified. The hostess stands beside the teapot like a high priestess guarding a sacred relic. She is smiling, which is never a good sign. Her hand hovers near the handle, but she does not pour. That is her power move. No one can eat until she makes the first move. And she is making none. Instead, she's chatting about the bloom patterns of her wisteria while holding everyone hostage with a teacup lid. You glance at the cucumber sandwiches. They are cut into triangles so small they qualify as abstract concepts. You know they contain cucumber because you can see it peeking out with the sad determination of someone who has given up on flavour. Next to them, a plate of scones that appear to have been baked for military application. You estimate they could shatter a window if launched with moderate force. The jam is in a crystal bowl. The cream is in a dish with a tiny silver spoon that exists purely to mock you. You know you must take a very small amount. Anything more would suggest gluttony. Anything less would suggest you are unfamiliar with dairy. You practice your spooning technique in your head. It feels like preparing for surgery. One brave guest reaches for a sandwich. All eyes flick toward her. The hostess pauses mid-sentence. The guest hesitates, then retreats. She was not given permission. She is now socially tainted. You turn your attention to the teapot again. It has a floral design and a spout shaped like a threat. You wonder if it is actually full or if this is all part of the illusion. The Victorian tea table is not about nourishment. It is about performance. Eventually, the hostess lifts the teapot. The room exhales. You straighten your back. It has begun. She pours with deliberate grace, filling cups with liquid that smells faintly of bergamot and anxiety. A maid begins to circulate, offering sugar cubes with silver tongs. You take one. 2 is indulgent, 3 is morally suspect. You stir gently, clockwise. Counterclockwise is a regional controversy and must be avoided. A plate is passed. You take a biscuit. It is round, beige, and has the texture of ancient plaster. You bite carefully. It crumbles like a relic. You smile. You nod. You pretend your mouth is not immediately turning to dust. Someone nearby dares to comment on the cake. It is received with silence. The cake is not to be discussed. It is simply to be respected. You note that no one is touching the jelly. It quivers each time someone walks past, like it knows it was a mistake. You avoid looking directly at it. You fear it will remember. You manage a second biscuit. You chew as if you have a secret. Across the room, the woman in lilac smiles faintly. You smile back. You're both pretending to be nourished. The hostess asks if anyone would like more tea. No one speaks. A single nod is given. More is poured. The ceremony continues. You are full of air, crumbs, and stress. The tea table has fed your reputation, not your stomach, and you will leave hungrier than you arrived. But at least you did not touch the jelly. There are rules. You do not lift your pinky. You do not slurp. You do not stir too aggressively unless you want rumours about your temperament. Teacups are porcelain traps designed to reveal whether you were raised correctly. Spill your tea and you may as well move to Wales and take up goat farming. You take a look at your cup. The porcelain is so thin you can see daylight through it. The floral pattern is dainty, hand-painted, and silently judging you. You are meant to hold the cup by the handle, thumb and forefinger only, no strangling. You must not touch the bowl of the cup unless you want to be whispered about in church. You bring it to your lips. The room feels suddenly too quiet. Someone coughs politely behind a fan. You freeze. Do you sip now, or wait until the hostess has sipped first? You pretend to examine the rim. It is clean. Of course it is. You bought gloves just for this. You shift slightly and realize your saucer is tilted. You adjust it with the precision of someone disarming a bomb. Finally you sip. It is lukewarm. You are grateful. Hot tea is dangerous. You must never blow on it. That implies poor planning. If it scalds you, you are to suffer in silence. You take another sip. Just enough to show appreciation, but not enough to suggest thirst. Thirst is a working-class emotion. You are not here to hydrate. You are here to demonstrate control. A woman to your left stirs her tea a little too quickly. The spoon hits the side of the cup with a high-pitched chime. Several heads turn. She flushes slightly. The damage is done. She has revealed herself to be the sort of person who might question a bill or read novels. You place your spoon quietly on the saucer, bowl facing downward. You pretend not to notice her shame. Sugar is optional. Milk is debated. Some believe milk should go in first to protect the porcelain from heat. Others say it goes in last for flavour. You choose last. You are modern, brave, potentially reckless. You pour a careful drop, not too much. You are not making a potion. You stir once, gently. The liquid swirls without complaint. Your hand begins to cramp. You are still holding the cup. You do not know where to put it down. There is a doily on the side table, but it looks like it belongs to someone else. You return the cup to the saucer. The clink is soft, safe, acceptable. You glance around. Everyone is pretending they are not monitoring one another's technique. Everyone is. A lady across the room makes a small noise. Her teacup trembles. Her saucer tilts. A single drop escapes and lands on her glove. She freezes. So does the table. You see it in her eyes. Panic. Grief. The knowledge that her reputation now depends on how she handles this moment. She dabs it gently with a napkin. No one moves. The napkin disappears into her lap. The conversation resumes, but she will be remembered. You take another sip. Your hands are steady. Your face is calm. Your soul is tired. The tea tastes like flowers and fear. You have no idea what blend it is. Earl Grey, Darjeeling, disappointment. You nod politely as if it is your favourite. You do not express preference. Preference is divisive. Across the room, someone sets their cup down too loudly. A servant flinches. A dog barks faintly from another room. You grip your saucer tighter. You're in the eye of a storm made of porcelain, and one wrong sip could send you into exile. You finish your tea. You place the cup gently on the saucer. The table does not collapse. The room continues. You have survived. For now. There will be another round. There is always another round. And each one is another chance to ruin everything. With grace and a teaspoon. Tea party food is small, dry, and emotionally unavailable. You're expected to nibble it like a demure woodland creature while pretending to be nourished. The offerings are arranged like a museum exhibit. The bread has been trimmed of crusts, joy, and moisture. You're handed one by a maid who looks apologetic, and you receive it like it's a family heirloom. You take a bite. It tastes like compressed humidity and garden regret. You chew slowly, not because you are savouring it, but because chewing too quickly would indicate intention. And eating with intention is an act of rebellion. You glance around the room. Everyone else is chewing at the same pace, a synchronized ballet of politeness and digestive suppression. Next comes the scone. It looks promising. It has structure. It has form. You are hopeful. You break it open with your gloved hands and it resists. It is the texture of drywall. You pretend not to notice. You apply jam with the tiny spoon provided, dabbing it delicately as though dressing a wound. Then comes the cream, which is thick enough to spread social consequences if mishandled. You scoop a modest amount and apply it with trembling hands. There is no correct order. Some say cream first, others say jam. Entire friendships have ended over this. You choose one at random and commit. You take a bite. It is dry. It is dense. You struggle. You smile. Your eyes water slightly. The hostess is watching. You nod like it is the finest scone of your life. She smiles back. She knows. She has chosen this on purpose. Tiny cakes appear next. Battenberg, fondant fancies, miniature lemon tarts. All of them deceptively cheerful in colour and mysteriously tasteless. The Battenberg is square and ominous. You take a small bite. It disintegrates into sweet dust. The fondant fancy is coated in icing so firm it could survive a minor carriage accident. The lemon tart is neither tart nor particularly lemon. It is simply damp. You reach for the smallest cake available. A pink-iced cube the size of a walnut. It wobbles slightly as you lift it. You place it on your plate. You cut it in half. You eat one half. The texture is oddly spongy, like it has emotional baggage. You eat the second half because now it's a commitment. You are now full of sugar and lies. Your stomach lets out the faintest gurgle. You freeze. Did anyone hear that? You sip tea immediately to silence the rebellion. Your corset is already pressed firmly against your digestive system, creating a hostile work environment for your organs. You're aware that you will be full for the next 12 hours, not from volume, but from tension. You glance at the jelly again. It is still untouched, still trembling. A social decoy, there to test the weak. You avoid it and turn back to your cake. The woman next to you is eating a sliver of Victoria sponge with surgical precision. You mimic her pace. Bite. Pause. Sip. Smile. Repeat. You are no longer aware of what anything tastes like. It is all texture and temperature. The illusion of indulgence with none of the satisfaction. You are not here to enjoy food. You are here to survive it. With poise. You may only discuss the weather, your neighbour's hydrangeas, and Queen Victoria's latest frown. Do not mention politics, digestive issues, or your cousin's poetry. The art of Victorian small talk is saying nothing with great enthusiasm while slowly losing your will to live. The room hums with the gentle murmur of carefully curated nonsense. You perch on the edge of your chair, sipping tea that tastes like discipline, nodding at a woman who has been explaining the behaviour of her begonias for what feels like a month. You smile. You make an appreciative sound. You do not ask a question. If you ask a question, she may answer, and then the cycle begins again. The rules are simple and soul-crushing. You must appear interested but not invested, witty but not clever, animated but not theatrical. You can comment on the chill in the air, you can compare lace trims, you can remark that the lilac is late this season, even if you have no idea when lilac is supposed to arrive. If you run out of topics, compliment someone's gloves. If they thank you, say the colour is unusual. This means nothing but sounds like it might. A woman seated beside you brings up the topic of train schedules. This is a safe haven. Trains are acceptable because they are modern without being exciting. You nod seriously as she recounts the delay between Paddington and Bath. You agree it was a scandal. You both pretend this matters. Someone nearby mentions that they once had to stand in a third-class carriage. You pretend not to hear. You do not wish to be drawn into a memory involving exertion. You attempt to steer the conversation toward birds, not exotic ones, just the local kind. Sparrows mostly. They are emotionally neutral. You mention how lively they are in spring. Someone adds that they sometimes leave droppings on the garden statues. This is dangerously close to bodily functions. The hostess tenses. You redirect immediately, pivoting to the merits of wrought iron fencing. It is bland. It is safe. You are back on track. One woman brings up a recent concert. This is risky. If she mentions rhythm, you are doomed. Thankfully, she confines herself to the beauty of the pianist's hands. You nod along, carefully avoiding the phrase artistic passion. Passion is a banned substance at this event. If it cannot be embroidered onto a cushion, it should not be mentioned. You smile at the woman across from you. She smiles back. There is no warmth in it. It is the kind of smile that says, "I know what you did last season, and I have the calling card to prove it." She remarks on your brooch. You thank her. She says it reminds her of one her cousin wore during a fainting episode. You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. You do not wish to be associated with anything dramatic. You are trying to maintain a reputation of pleasant blandness. A young man enters the conversation circle. His collar is too high and his eyes too eager. He comments on the fog. You all agree. The fog is very foggy today. Thick, even. One woman suggests it is the kind of fog that makes one reflective. There is silence. Everyone is unsure if this is philosophical or just a strange thing to say. You smile gently and offer that it certainly makes the chimneys more mysterious. This is accepted. You have saved the group. You make the mistake of laughing, not loudly, just enough that your shoulders move. Someone notices. You're instantly recalibrated from refined to bordering on emotional. You sip your tea to suppress it. You have become too visible. It is time to fade again. You listen. You nod. You offer small edible comments. You are slowly vanishing into a fog of agreeable phrases and floral observations. You feel your soul drifting out the window toward the hydrangeas. Someone asks what you think of the wallpaper. You say it is restful. They nod. It is the perfect answer. The conversation continues. No one is offended. No one is engaged. You are succeeding. Quietly. Miserably. Perfectly. The hostess rules the room in velvet and vengeance. Compliment her decor and she will mention that it's last year's wallpaper, with the tone of someone offering you arsenic. She smiles often. None of it is real. Her job is to pretend this tea party is effortless. Your job is to pretend you believe her. Her name is embroidered into every napkin, though she insists the embroidery was a gift. Her presence enters a room before she does, usually in the form of sandalwood perfume and lightly suppressed judgment. When she approaches, people straighten their backs instinctively. Even the biscuits seem to rearrange themselves out of fear. She glides, never walks, trailing a hem that could smother a lesser woman. Her gloves are pearl-coloured, her earrings look like they have secrets, and her expression carries the warmth of a recently polished marble bust. You do not speak first, she does. Always. When she leans in to greet you, you brace yourself for a sentence that is simultaneously flattering, disarming, and potentially career-ending. You thank her for the invitation. She responds with the words, "How lovely." She does not say what is lovely. The ambiguity is strategic. She compliments your dress, then mentions her seamstress once made something similar for her kitchen maid. She smiles when she says it. You smile too. You both know what just happened. Every guest receives a dose of her attention. She is not cruel. She is precise. She distributes greetings with the same care one might use when planting landmines. A nod here, a comment there, always just enough to ensure no one forgets who is in charge. Her voice is soft, but it is the softness of expensive sheets before they suffocate you. She surveys the room like a general inspecting troops who may disappoint her. The maid trips slightly over a rug. The hostess does not react, but later the rug is gone. The maid is quieter. The punishment is invisible but permanent. She praises the lemon tarts in front of one guest, only to mention moments later that lemon is rather common this season. No one touches the tarts again. She has mastered the art of the backward compliment. Your brooch is unusual. Your hairstyle is very youthful. Your cousin's engagement is surprisingly sensible. Each phrase is wrapped in civility and dipped in slow-burning venom. You cannot respond directly. You can only nod, thank her, and wonder if your corset is tight enough to keep your real feelings from escaping. Her tea pouring is an event. She lifts the pot like it's an heirloom sword. She pours for some, not for others, depending on the rhythm of her silent score. You are offered tea. This is good. You are offered it last. This is not. You accept it with gratitude, already wondering which facial expression got you demoted. When someone makes a small social error, speaking too loudly, taking 2 sugar cubes, laughing during a story about gout. She notes it. Not publicly, just a small glance to her left, a small tightening of the lips. That guest will not be invited next time. Or worse, they will be invited again and seated near the draughty window. No conversation escapes her notice. If you are praised, she redirects the attention within moments. If you are struggling, she extends no mercy. She once watched a guest spill cream onto her own glove and simply said how unfortunate before asking someone else to describe their gardenias. She does not console, she observes. You do not dislike her, you fear her, which is the foundation of Victorian friendship. She is the tea party incarnate, elegant, controlled, a beautiful room filled with sugar and unspoken danger. You thank her as you leave. She says it was nothing. You both know it was everything. Some tea parties include small children or lapdogs, which adds chaos, noise, and the faint chance of being peed on by something in a bowl. Victorian children are supposed to be silent, charming, and dressed like minor royalty. So, obviously they are none of those things. The child is wearing velvet, possibly maroon, possibly wine-stained from an earlier tantrum. He is roughly the size of a cake stand and has been told to behave. He interprets this as permission to crawl under the furniture. His name is probably Edmund or Percy or something equally tragic. He smells faintly of treacle and rebellion. He appears at your elbow without warning, clutching what might once have been a biscuit and is now just a collection of crumbs glued together with jam and defiance. He says nothing. He stares. You do not make eye contact. That would encourage him. You sit very still and hope he moves on to someone weaker. His governess is nearby, pretending not to exist. She is seated slightly apart from the other guests, clutching a handkerchief and a prayer. Her expression is a mixture of despair and spiritual detachment. You suspect she has been in this position before. She only intervenes when Percy begins chewing on the hem of the hostess's curtain. Even then, it is a gentle correction, like she's scolding a ghost. No one wants a scene. She certainly does not. Then there is the dog. No one knows who brought the dog. It is a small white creature with eyes like polished buttons and the energy of someone who just did something unforgivable. It has a ribbon around its neck and opinions about everyone's ankles. It scuttles between chairs, occasionally stopping to sniff a foot or growl at someone with strong perfume. It has been offered a saucer of cream. No one is quite sure if this was approved or if the dog simply claimed it. At one point the dog barks, a sharp, aggressive yip that causes 3 guests to flinch and 1 woman to drop her teaspoon. The sound echoes through the drawing room like a pistol shot at a baptism. The hostess does not flinch. She simply says the dog is spirited and smiles in a way that implies you should agree or leave the country. Percy has now discovered the sugar cubes. He is attempting to stack them into what might be a tower or a shrine. Several have fallen under the piano. A guest attempts to retrieve them but is blocked by the dog, who seems to believe the piano is its territory. The guest backs away. The sugar remains lost. This is now the dog's room. You're just borrowing it. Another child, a girl dressed in layers of pastel gauze and suppressed emotion, walks solemnly past with a doll clutched to her chest like a tiny hostage. She sits in the corner without blinking for several minutes. You attempt to smile, she does not respond. Her doll might be cursed. So might she. The children are supposed to be seen and not heard. which is why you're now hearing everything. Footsteps, whispering, the occasional muffled wail. Someone is giggling under a settee. A tiny shoe rolls into the centre of the room like a warning. Someone else is pulling petals off the centrepiece and muttering about bees. A guest makes the mistake of asking the children about their interests. This opens a portal. Percy begins listing every type of insect he has ever captured, including one he named after the butler. Another child describes, in vivid detail, the time she witnessed a frog's funeral. The governess attempts to intervene. She fails. You sip your tea. It does not help. The dog has now climbed into someone's lap, uninvited. It curls into a judgmental circle and begins licking itself with loud, slurping commitment. The guest does not move. She smiles, eyes unfocused, soul temporarily evacuated. You understand. You've been there. Children giggle. Someone cries. A vase wobbles. A biscuit is thrown with surprising force and grazes the hat of a woman who has never been touched by anything domestic in her life. She does not react. She may be unconscious. The hostess glances over but does not intervene. She's above this. She's already composing the invitation list for her next event, and some of you will not be on it. You sit surrounded by lace, crumbs, and small creatures with no volume control. You do not panic. You breathe. Slowly. Carefully. No one ever says anything cruel. They simply imply it with stunning precision. A raised eyebrow. A pause before the word interesting. A reference to your cousin's sudden trip to the countryside. By the end of the party, reputations have been shredded with the efficiency of a paper mill, and it starts slowly. A glance, a vague smile, a question asked just loud enough for 3 nearby people to overhear. Has anyone heard from Miss Elbridge lately? It is phrased like concern but lands like a guillotine. Someone responds with an airy tone and a sip of tea. Oh yes, I believe she's taken up painting in Cornwall for her health. Cornwall, of course, is code for exile, and painting is code for shame. You try not to react. You are not part of this conversation, not yet, but you are adjacent, which means you are fair game. You place your teacup down slowly and consider the safest possible comment. Perhaps something about the unpredictable fog, or the recent price of lavender water. Something so crushingly neutral it forms a fog of its own. You remain silent. It is the wisest move. A woman to your left whispers something behind her fan. You cannot hear it. That is the point, but you see the reaction. A brief flicker of scandal in another guest's eyes. A moment of tension so subtle it could be mistaken for indigestion. Then, nothing. The conversation moves on, but the damage has been done. Somewhere a family is now slightly less respected than it was 3 minutes ago. You listen carefully as 2 guests discuss a recent wedding. The bride was lovely, one says, with the exact tone of someone describing a decorative cabbage. The other nods and says her dress was quite ambitious. Ambitious is one of the deadliest words in the Victorian arsenal. It is never a compliment. It suggests overreaching, trying, wanting. Wanting is deeply embarrassing. The hostess passes nearby. She smiles at you and remarks on your earrings. How sweet, she says. A charming style. You thank her, already spiralling. Charming means old. Sweet means provincial. Style means something that was in fashion 4 years ago. You want to throw the earrings into the teapot. Instead, you sip your tea and nod like a woman with no regrets and no mirrors. Gossip does not need facts. It feeds on suggestion. The absence of information is the richest soil for speculation. Did you hear Lady Adwell has been spending time with that Hungarian pianist? That is all. No details, no accusations. Just a nationality and a musical profession. The room will fill in the blanks. By tomorrow she will be pregnant, penniless, and possibly learning the cello. Someone asks about your cousin. You freeze. Which cousin? Why? What do they know? You mention that he is studying medicine. A woman tilts her head. Oh, she says, how practical. Practical is the death sentence. It means boring. It means poor. It means someone will marry him only if all the poets are dead. You attempt a counterattack. You mention Lady Bartley's daring hat at the last garden party. You do not say you disliked it. You say it was unforgettable. You say it made a statement. You do not say what kind of statement. Everyone nods. Everyone understands. The hat was a disaster. Lady Bartley will feel the chill next season. The conversation turns to flowers. Safe territory. But then someone mentions lilies, and someone else says lilies remind them of funerals. A pause, a sip of tea, a glance toward Miss Forrester. Her mother recently passed. Or maybe she didn't. The point is now she might as well have. Miss Forrester adjusts her gloves and says nothing. By the end of the tea, no one has said anything truly unkind. But 3 engagements are on the verge of collapse. One guest will be quietly dropped from future invitations. And you now suspect your laugh might be described as piercing. You smile politely, sit up straighter, and mentally erase your entire personality, just in case. The tea party is coming to an end. Leave too early and you seem cold. Leave too late and you seem clingy. The only acceptable time to leave is 3 minutes after the hostess begins talking about hydrangeas for the 3rd time. You must make your exit gracefully, as if being called away by destiny or gout. You begin preparing to leave 20 minutes before you actually stand up. This is the way. There are signs to look for. The teapot has been refilled one too many times. Someone has started rearranging the teaspoons just to feel alive. The room's atmosphere is beginning to congeal. You shift in your seat, casually. Not as though you are desperate for freedom, but as though you have just remembered something dignified and slightly tragic. Like a forgotten engagement or a dog you left cooling in the shade. You glance at the window, not dramatically, just enough to hint at a vague awareness of the passage of time, the encroaching twilight, and the slowly mounting panic inside your tightly corseted soul. The hydrangea anecdote has looped. It is now on its 3rd retelling, this time featuring a new character named Charles who may or may not be imaginary. You nod along. Everyone nods. We are trapped in polite déjà vu. Your teacup is empty, has been for some time. But to refill it would be a declaration of surrender. You set it back on the saucer with the gentle clink of someone filing for emotional divorce. The teaspoon rests at an odd angle. You adjust it twice. Everyone notices. No one comments. The guest beside you is either recounting the plot of a recent sermon or simply naming saints in alphabetical order. You do not know. You are no longer listening. Your body is still here, but your spirit has already climbed into the carriage and is halfway home. You place your hand gently on your knee, signalling to your imaginary valet that it is time to deploy the exit strategy. You make eye contact with the hostess. Crucial. She must see you rising. If you leave without this moment, it's as if you were never there. If you rise too abruptly, you look rude. If you hover too long, you become furniture. You smile. She smiles. There is a silent exchange of power. You are leaving. She is letting you. The treaty is sealed. You murmur a thank you, but it must be multi-layered. It must convey gratitude, admiration, a hint of apology, and just a whisper of spiritual fatigue. You compliment something, anything, the conversation, the rose-patterned napkins, the choice of ambient humidity. You do not compliment the food. That would invite more food. This is not a risk you are willing to take. The hostess says something like, "So lovely to have you," or "You must come again sometime." Neither is binding. Both are codes for "we will never speak of this again," but in a way that maintains plausible deniability. You smile as if you've just received a meaningful award. You bow your head like a woman who has completed a sacred task. You have. A maid arrives with your shawl. You take it slowly, wrapping it over your shoulders like a character in an opera, leaving behind a life of quiet devastation. Your gloves are retrieved. One finger does not go in quite right. You do not fix it. Let the imperfections symbolize your inner turmoil. You stand. Posture impeccable. Eyes forward. You must not stumble. You must not knock over the sugar tongs. You are walking a tightrope made of doilies and judgment. You nod to the room. No words. Words are too risky now. You're in the exit zone. Anything you say can and will be used against you by next Tuesday's luncheon. In the foyer, the hostess appears again, as is tradition. She has teleported ahead. She makes one final remark. Something soft, just ambiguous enough to haunt your dreams. You mirror it with a similarly empty yet devastatingly polite phrase. How charming the garden was. How delightful the company. How invigorating the scent of lilac wallpaper paste. And then it is done. You exit into the evening. You do not run, but your soul does. The moment the carriage door closes, your shoulders drop 3 inches. You exhale. Your jaw unclenches. You no longer need to hold in your opinions. You made it out. Your gloves are slightly stained, your dignity slightly wrinkled, but your name was not ruined. You return home. You survived. The door clicks shut behind you, and immediately your spine sighs like it has been waiting decades for this moment. You kick off your boots with the rage of a repressed nation. Your feet pulse with the ghost of every polite nod and strategically flexed ankle you performed over the last 3 hours. You have never hated small talk more. You have never loved your own furniture more. Your maid appears. She knows. She does not ask questions. She simply brings you a lukewarm cloth and a glass of something bracing, and vanishes like a sympathetic spectre. You make a sound that might be gratitude or exhaustion, or the slow death rattle of a woman who smiled too much while her stomach growled through 4 rounds of dried pastry. You are now half melted into your upholstery and legally incapable of hosting conversation. You peel off your gloves. One of them has a faint tea stain near the fingertip. You remember. It was the moment your pinky twitched and the cup wobbled. It did not spill, but it trembled, and so did you. The lady next to you noticed. Her expression did not change, but her soul absolutely downgraded your status by 2 whole tea tiers. You tell yourself it is fine, everyone makes mistakes. Then you remember this is Victorian society, and mistakes are fatal unless buried in lace and denial. You consider writing a letter of apology to the hostess, but settle instead on internal screaming. You may never use that particular teacup grip again. The trauma is too fresh. Your corset is now a crumpled metaphor for everything that went wrong. It digs into your hip like a judgmental whisper. You drape it across a chair. where it glares at you for not sitting with your knees angled at 45 degrees the entire afternoon. You glare back. Tomorrow you will burn it, or wear it again, depends on your mood. You lie back and begin the mental post-mortem. Who was there? Who made eye contact? Who smiled too much? Who smiled too little? Was that one woman actually talking about the weather, or was that a coded insult about your hydrangeas? You replay the conversation. It might have been both. Your brain will continue this analysis for the next 6 to 8 business days. Your stomach remembers that the food was mostly imaginary. A crustless cucumber sandwich has the nutritional value of a decorative doily. You summon a scone from the emergency tin you keep hidden from polite society. It is dry and slightly resentful, but it understands you in a way no human ever will. You consider taking a bath. You instead stare at the ceiling and reflect on how the dog was the only honest participant in the entire event. You are fairly certain it growled at the most powerful woman in the room. Bold, suicidal, inspiring. You remember snippets of gossip, a mention of someone's second cousin in Vienna, a comment about new wallpaper that sounded like treason. You were complimented on your brooch. But was it a real compliment? Was it a trap? Was it sarcastic? You are not sure anymore. You might bury the brooch just to be safe. Your cat jumps onto the chaise, needs your arm and gives you a look that says, "Why do you do this to yourself?" You do not answer. You simply close your eyes and exhale. For a moment, you imagine a world where women can eat sandwiches with corners and say exactly what they think about someone's curtains without social exile. It is beautiful. It is fictional. It is not Victorian England. You will go to another tea party. Eventually, you will wear the gloves and the boots and the mask of effortless civility. But not tonight. Tonight you are free. You are horizontal, and you are holding a biscuit with both hands like the wild creature you truly are. And what's most important is that you survived. A few days pass, just enough time for your face to remember how to rest, and for your shoulders to drop back into their natural, un-Victorian position. You start to believe you've returned to normal life, but just as you think you're free, an invitation arrives like a beautifully folded threat, because tea was only the warm-up. Next, you're heading into the Victorian dinner party, where the stakes are higher, the rules are stricter, and the meal doesn't end so much as it slowly wins against you. More courses, more conversation, more opportunities to accidentally pick up the wrong glass and ruin your entire reputation with a single sip. So take one last calming breath and follow the scent of roasted perfection and quiet panic into the dining room. Your carriage lurches through London's muddy streets, its wheels hitting cobblestones like a suitcase being dragged down a staircase. Inside, the air is thick with fog, leather polish, and that vague hint of boiled cabbage that haunts all enclosed Victorian spaces. You clutch your invitation like it's a pardon and brace for social war. Outside, the gas lamps flicker in the mist, casting wobbly halos of light that do nothing to improve the visibility or your mood. Your driver is a silent, vaguely resentful man in a top hat that appears to have seen battle. Occasionally he mutters something to the horses. It might be encouragement, it might be curses. Either way, the horses seem unimpressed. You're wearing your second best gloves because your best gloves were eaten by mildew last week. Your gown is respectable. Slightly out of fashion, yes, but only if someone is being cruel about it. Which they will be. It smells faintly of camphor, starch, and desperation. You've pinned a small cameo to your bodice to imply you come from people who used to have money. The cameo depicts a woman crying into a lace handkerchief. It feels relatable. You glance down at the invitation again. Lady Thistlebalm requests the pleasure of your company. A lie, obviously. She requests your compliance, your obedience to 100 unspoken rules, and the pleasure will be entirely hers. The street narrows. A sudden jolt throws you against the velvet wall of the carriage. You bite your tongue slightly but maintain a polite expression, just in case anyone is watching through the fog, which somehow feels possible. Victorian London is 30% brick, 20% soot, and 50% people judging you from windows. You pass other carriages on their way to similar events, some more elegant than yours. One positively glowing with wealth, drawn by matched greys and a driver in a pristine coat. You shrink slightly into your seat. Comparison is a Victorian blood sport. You've already lost round one. Inside your small handbag is a folded square of paper, listing which fork is for what course. You've studied it until the words stopped making sense. Fish fork, oyster fork, dessert fork, emergency fork. One of those might be made up. You'll know soon enough. Your corset is manageable for now, just snug enough to limit airflow but not yet causing hallucinations. You took small sips of broth earlier in preparation. Anything more and you risk indigestion or worse, audible digestive noises. In a quiet Victorian dining room, your stomach is a potential public disgrace. You try to recall everything your aunt drilled into you while lacing your stays. Do not laugh. Do not yawn. Do not cough unless it is a demure cough behind a gloved hand. If you must faint, faint silently and to the left, never to the right. That's considered melodramatic. The carriage hits a pothole large enough to swallow a dog. You bounce. Something cracks. You're unsure if it was the carriage or your hip. You consider turning back, faking illness, fleeing the city. But no, tonight is too important. An invitation like this could mean social survival for the next year. If you do well, you might be invited to the spring garden party. If you fail, you'll be remembered only as the woman who reached for the wrong bread plate and ruined a marriage proposal. The horses snort. The driver coughs dramatically. You pull your shawl tighter and sit up straighter as the townhouse comes into view. Stone pillars, a red door, 2 gas lamps flickering like twin eyes of judgment. The butler is already stepping out to meet you. The time has come. You smooth your gown, force a neutral expression onto your face, and prepare to enter the arena. You arrive at Lady Thistlebalm's grand townhouse, a tall brick building full of style and quiet pressure. A uniformed servant opens the door before you even knock. You're led into a hallway lined with ferns and gaslight, where someone takes your cloak and 20% of your confidence. The air inside is warmer than expected, thick with the scent of beeswax polish, roasted meat, and social expectation. Your boots make a muffled squeak on the runner, which echoes with far too much personality. You try not to look directly at the other cloaks on the rack. They're nicer than yours, sleeker, less water-damaged. You immediately regret not choosing the one without the mysterious shoulder stain. It's probably gravy. Or fear. The butler, who could outstare a gargoyle, gestures toward the next room without speaking. You nod in reply, as if accepting a life sentence, and make your way forward. Everything is velvet and marble and far too many mirrors. One is placed just slightly too low, presumably to catch you in the act of existing. You catch a glimpse of yourself. You look fine, not radiant, not arrestable. Just fine, like a woman who has memorized all the rules but still expects to die by soup spoon. A grandfather clock ticks loudly from the corner, the kind that sounds like it disapproves of you. The time reads precisely 7:45 p.m. You are exactly 15 minutes past the stated arrival hour. Perfect. This is not an accident. This is the golden window. Arrive earlier and you seem overeager. Arrive later and you're risking scandal, judgment, or being seated next to someone with breath like herring death. No, this is the sweet spot, the smug middle ground of the socially fluent. You wipe your gloved hands against your skirt gently, as if brushing away shame. The maid who took your shawl has vanished. The corridor seems longer now, like it's watching you walk. The wallpaper is floral. It might be mocking you. You wonder if it is possible to perish from etiquette-based anxiety. It probably is. The Victorians were always inventing new ways to die. A maid scurries past with a tray of crystal glasses. Her shoes make no sound. You wonder briefly if she has hooves. Everyone around you moves like part of a silent machine, synchronized and precise, as though the house itself is alive and deeply disappointed in your hemline. You try not to touch anything. You suspect even the walls could report you. Someone hands you a small card embossed in gold. It simply says, "Tea will follow." No further explanation. Tea will follow what? Dinner? Drama? A duel? No one explains. You tuck it into your glove like it's a state secret. There is a marble-topped side table by the drawing-room door, upon which rests a silver tray of calling cards. You are not to touch them. You are only to acknowledge that they exist, like ghosts or unspoken tension. Someone behind you clears their throat, subtly reminding you that you are loitering. You move. Voices drift in from the drawing room ahead, smooth and low and filled with the kind of effortless self-assurance usually reserved for cats and aristocrats. You don't recognize any of them yet, but you will. You will be introduced in a slow, agonizing parade of eye contact and light bowing, and every single person will remember what you said at the last event. You, of course, will remember no one's name and spend half the night pretending you are deep in thought, rather than entirely adrift in panic. A large floral arrangement looms beside the entrance, towering and aggressive, like a jungle trap made entirely of peonies. You inhale near it to buy time and promptly sneeze, violently. A nearby footman flinches. Somewhere in the house a teacup trembles. There is no turning back now. You smooth your skirt, position your shoulders at a respectable angle of poise, and prepare to enter the room where reputations rise, fall, and occasionally combust under pressure. Dinner awaits, conversation looms, and you are officially 15 minutes late. Perfect. You're guided into the parlour where soft chamber music plays and guests stand stiffly like well-dressed furniture. Everyone is pretending they've never met, even if they were just at brunch together that morning. You're handed a glass of sherry, warm and sticky, like syrup filtered through judgment. You try to hold the glass as if it brings you comfort rather than concern. It doesn't. It is the colour of ancient amber and tastes like disappointment soaked in raisins. Still, you sip, because holding a drink gives your hand something to do, and it is better than clutching your own wrist like a Victorian ghost. The room is filled with muffled conversation, not whispers, not chatting, just a series of phrases being exchanged like calling cards. No one actually listens. No one actually blinks. Topics are limited to the weather yesterday, and how much better the weather used to be when people were respectable. You do your best to insert yourself into a cluster of guests who appear mildly tolerable. A woman in mauve is explaining the death of her cousin's canary with the gravity of a state funeral. The others nod with the solemnity such things demand. You nod too, not knowing whether the canary's name was Henry or Harold, but certain he died with dignity. A young man with sideburns and the facial expression of a reluctant poet turns to you and remarks that the fog tonight is of a particularly melancholic thickness. You agree. You describe it as theatrical. He corrects you. No, he says, it is not theatrical. It is wistful. You apologize to the fog. Across the room, a gentleman gestures with his glass while recounting his recent trip to Bath. You catch the phrase Roman spirits. You assume he means ghosts, but it turns out he is referring to mineral water. This is followed by a heated debate on the merits of brisk walking versus gentle strolling. Someone insists walking too quickly can cause hysteria. A woman near the fireplace actually fans herself at the mention of an elevated pulse. Your sherry is now room temperature, possibly even body temperature. You continue to drink it slowly and with the caution one reserves for questionable broth. You have already accidentally stood in someone else's conversation circle and backed into a potted plant shaped like disapproval. The piano is playing something vaguely romantic, but no one is looking at each other long enough for it to matter. At one point you make eye contact with a woman wearing an embroidered collar shaped like the wings of a dead goose. She nods politely. You nod back. That may have been the highlight of your evening so far. The rest is a blur of strained smiles and performative laughter at things that are only barely amusing. Someone makes a joke about pickled onions. There is a full 7-second pause before anyone dares to laugh. You scan the room for any signs of genuine connection. There are none. Just more people arranged in loose semicircles, hovering near furniture but never quite relaxing. The sofas are decorative. No one sits. Sitting would imply ease. Ease would imply comfort. Comfort, of course, is suspicious. There is a clock on the mantel, its tick just audible enough to remind you that time is passing, but not fast enough. You swirl the sherry, hoping it evaporates through sheer will. It does not. Eventually a maid enters and clears her throat just enough to suggest something is about to happen. The guests stiffen, shoulders lift. A butler bellows your full name into the void, and all heads turn to evaluate your gown, posture, lineage, and eyebrow symmetry. You walk in smiling, praying your gloves match, and that no one remembers what you said about boiled eggs at the last party. The announcement echoes down the hallway like a cannonball wrapped in lace. Your name, once so ordinary, is now a public performance. You are no longer a person. You are a resume with ankles. You enter slowly, trying to project composure and mystery, which is difficult when your left shoe squeaks faintly with each step like a mouse experiencing doubt. Everyone has stopped talking. Conversations hang in the air like unfinished sentences. You are now the subject of temporary fascination. A woman in lavender inspects your hem with her peripheral vision. A man in a cravat nods as though weighing your dowry against the price of oats. You smile and give the smallest possible nod in return, the kind that says I am both honoured and terrified, and also, yes, this is real silk. The butler steps aside like a man who has thrown someone to the lions and now wishes them luck. You are alone at the threshold, framed by gilt moulding and the collective gaze of people who own more teaspoons than you have opinions. You take 3 steps forward and stop precisely at the designated conversational radius. Any further, and you would be encroaching. Any less, and you'd be lingering like a ghost in taffeta. There are rules, of course. Rules about how to enter, where to stand, how to hold your face so that it says I belong here, but not so confidently that it suggests ambition. You clasp your hands at your waist, not too high, not too low. Your fingers must be gently interlocked, never clenched. Clenched hands suggest secrets. Relaxed hands suggest wealth. You flex your knuckles once, then pretend you didn't. The music resumes gently. It is a waltz played at the speed of a dying sigh. You're not expected to dance, not yet. First you must stand, be seen, absorb attention like wallpaper with good posture. A tray of sherry floats past. You take a glass and hold it delicately, as if you have always held drinks this way and never once dropped one onto someone's lap during a heated discussion about pudding texture. A man approaches. He bows slightly. You do not know him, but he clearly knows you. He greets you with the careful enthusiasm of someone who has recently read your name in a newsletter. You smile and say something vague about the fog. He agrees. The fog is unusually sincere tonight, he says. You nod. Neither of you knows what that means. The woman beside him introduces herself, but not too clearly. You catch only the words, Countess and Devon. You assume she's important, possibly lethal. Her gown has too many layers to be worn by someone unarmed. She tells you that your colour choice is bold. You thank her. She did not say it was good. You're joined by another cluster of guests. You are now part of a conversation spiral, a temporary orbit of politeness and tactical compliments. Everyone is saying nothing with great elegance. Someone chuckles, someone sighs, someone makes a joke about parsnips. It is very well received. Your name is still hanging faintly in the air like perfume or a court summons. The butler announces the next guest, a viscount with a moustache shaped like moral compromise. The room turns, you exhale. For now the spotlight has moved, but the performance has only begun. Lady Thistlebaum emerges in a gown made of 40 yards of black taffeta and silent threats. She kisses you on the cheek, very nearly, and whispers, "So pleased you could come," which, in Victorian, may actually mean you've already disappointed me. Her gown rustles with menace. Each step she takes produces a sound somewhere between a paper fan snapping shut and a monarch issuing a decree. Her hair is styled into a shape that defies natural law and suggests she has secrets buried in it. Possibly relatives, possibly weapons. Her jewellery gleams, but not brightly. More like a warning beacon on a rocky shore. She surveys the room the way a hawk might study a field of mice. Guests straighten their posture instinctively. Conversations pause. Someone adjusts their brooch in terror. You resist the urge to bow. She makes eye contact with a duchess across the room, and in that silent exchange an entire political alliance is reaffirmed. When she speaks, her tone is light, melodic, and lined with polished steel. She asks after your aunt, whom she once met briefly at a luncheon and has held in mild suspicion ever since. You respond warmly, vaguely, carefully. Your aunt is much the same, you say. It is both truthful and meaningless. She approves. Lady Thistlebaum's husband, Lord Thistlebaum, trails behind her like an accessory she occasionally remembers to include. He nods at you in a way that suggests he's either bored, recently awoken from a nap, or thinking about turnips. He's wearing a dinner jacket so stiff it may be supporting him structurally. The hostess glides from group to group, issuing greetings, compliments, and the occasional subtle warning. She comments on someone's necklace. Delightful. Then immediately turns to another guest and remarks that rubies are often worn by the insecure. You nod along, pretending you understand the rules of this invisible game, where the board is social standing and the pieces are facial expressions. She compliments your gown. You thank her, knowing full well that a compliment from Lady Thistlebaum could be sincere, sarcastic, or strategic, possibly all three. Her voice has the cadence of flattery, but her eyes are performing a full inventory of your stitching, buttons, and budget. She notes that you've chosen a shade that is quite daring this season. You cannot tell if she means that it is fashionable, foolish, or fatal. You are then gently repositioned, not physically, but socially. Lady Thistlebaum turns to a passing guest and introduces you in a tone that suggests she is offering a mildly interesting artifact for temporary examination. "This is Miss So-and-so," she says. "She is quite thoughtful." The pause after quite stretches a little too long. You smile tightly. You have just been labelled with an adjective designed to keep you at arm's length but not out of the room. Still, it could be worse. Last year she described someone as fascinating. That woman now lives in Switzerland. After another round of remarks about lace marriage prospects and the failure of modern French tailoring, Lady Thistlebaum claps her hands once, not loudly, not urgently, but with enough weight to signal a change in atmosphere. A footman emerges from the hallway. The dining bell is rung. All conversation stills, chairs shift. A lady lowers her sherry as though handing off a newborn. Lady Thistlebaum turns toward the grand doorway and declares simply, "Dinner." It is not a suggestion. It is a command from on high. The room moves as one organism, elegant and alarmed. She does not look back. She does not need to. The night has officially begun. And survival will require perfect posture, impeccable manners, and the emotional resilience of a Victorian sofa. The butler announces dinner like a funeral, and everyone rises in silent formation. You offer your arm to the gentleman assigned as your dinner escort, who smells faintly of horseradish and speaks exclusively in the passive voice. Together you march toward doom. Your escort says something about the weather, but not in a way that suggests he's ever experienced it. He tells you that the sky was observed to be cloudy. You nod and murmur that clouds were indeed noticed. The conversation is held entirely in the grammatical equivalent of holding hands with gloves on and a pane of glass between you. The hallway is long, lined with sombre portraits of people who look like they invented gout. The carpet absorbs sound, which means every cough, shuffle, and whispered prayer for strength feels terribly loud. Ahead of you, lace rustles, silk whispers, shoes tap softly. It is less a procession than a funeral march for spontaneity. You try not to walk too fast or too slow. The pace must be smooth, deliberate, and just indifferent enough to imply you're used to being paraded down velvet-lined corridors towards steaming plates of anxiety. You pass by a bust of someone's long-dead uncle who once served as a minor ambassador to Belgium, and looks like he hated every second of it. He judges you silently as you go. The dining room doors loom ahead, already open. Inside is a table long enough to seat a modest army, or a particularly tense family reunion. The silverware glints. The candles flicker with the energy of a séance. Everything gleams with expectation and mild menace. You are guided to your seat, the third on the left from the hostess, just far enough to not matter and just close enough to still be watched. Your escort bows slightly, then peels off to his assigned place, leaving behind a faint whiff of horseradish and unresolved social tension. Your chair awaits. It is carved, high-backed, and stares at you with the disapproval of someone who knows your family only married into money. But you cannot sit. No one can. Not yet. This is the pre-seating vigil. A sacred, socially perilous pause where everyone pretends to admire the floral arrangements, while secretly counting forks. The table is set with enough silverware to perform surgery. Place cards dictate your fate. You are seated between a nervous rector and a widow who collects bird skulls. No one is allowed to sit until the hostess does. Time slows. You hover politely beside your chair, ankles neatly aligned, face composed in the neutral expression of someone trying not to appear alarmed by how many tines a fork can have. The place settings stretch across the table like a well-planned ambush. Napkins are folded with militaristic precision. There are 5 glasses in front of you, each more mysterious than the last. 1 for water, 1 for white wine, 1 for red, 1 for dessert wine, and 1 for reasons that will never be revealed. The rector beside you mutters something about ecclesiastical seating hierarchies. You nod respectfully, though you're fairly certain he's just anxious about where he ranks next to the bishop's nephew. On your other side, the widow leans in slightly and informs you that her mourning period is over, but her emotional detachment is eternal. She has brought a pocket-sized bone from a heron's neck for luck. You offer a smile that conveys sympathy, interest, and alarm in equal measure. Across the table, a baronet's wife is engaged in silent warfare with the marchioness over who was placed closer to the soup tureen. The baronet's wife may have the upper hand, having once gifted the hostess a live swan. The marchioness is armed with a smile so cold it could be used to store dairy. Lady Thistlebomb finally glides in and approaches her throne at the head of the table. She does not sit right away. She pauses, takes a long, graceful breath, adjusts a glove that does not need adjusting. A footman adjusts a candelabra that does not need adjusting. You adjust your soul. Then, at last, she lowers herself into the chair, and so, like dominoes of velvet and lace, everyone else follows. There is a moment of collective seating, an awkward shuffle of skirts and chair legs. You are lowered into your seat by invisible forces and a general fear of creaking wood. The first course is still a mystery, but the first judgment has already been passed. You saw the glance the widow gave you. It was subtle, but lethal. Your seat offers a direct view of the centerpiece, a towering floral arrangement housing a pair of decorative pheasants and 1 disoriented bee. The flowers are mostly roses, lilies, and something that smells faintly of longing. You try not to sneeze. The rector compliments the symmetry of the table. You murmur something about the gilding on the soup spoons. The widow remains silent but starts peeling the label off her wineglass with the focus of someone who once saw too much. There is very little space between chairs. Every minor movement is felt, observed, and potentially analysed. You must control your limbs as if you are performing surgery with your elbows glued to your sides. Any gesture wider than 4 inches becomes a political act. You reach for your water glass with the tentative grace of someone trying not to set off a trap. There is no speaking across the table, only to your left and right. This means that your only conversational options are a man who just sneezed into his cravat and a woman who refers to her collection of avian skulls as the children she never had. You nod politely. It's going to be a long dinner. You glance down at the place card in front of you. Your name, written in calligraphy, feels like a prophecy. You're exactly where you were meant to be. Surrounded, contained, judged, and possibly poisoned by the floral centerpiece. You unfold your napkin with the delicate precision of a person defusing a bomb. You're not to tuck it. You're not to dab anything yet. You're absolutely not to mention that someone else tucked theirs. There are rules, and they will not save you. You gently lay the napkin across your lap, careful not to let it flutter too much, wrinkle oddly, or give off any indication that you are capable of movement or thought. It must rest there like a well-behaved pet, invisible yet omnipresent. You cannot use it yet. That would imply anticipation, and anticipation is vulgar. To your left, the nervous rector has already committed a crime. He tucked, fully tucked, into the waistcoat. The napkin has become part of his person, and he does not realize what he has done. The widow to your right sees it. You feel her judgment radiating across your collarbone. She says nothing, but her nostrils flare. A butler sees it too. He will tell someone. This will go in a ledger. You sit still. Your hands hover. A footman appears with the first dish. It is soup. Of course. The traditional opener for any Victorian event where people pretend to enjoy both food and each other. The soup is placed before you with a flourish that suggests royalty. You nod your thanks. You do not speak. Speaking now would be like whistling during surgery. The spoon must be used properly, away from the body, always away. You are not shoveling, you are guiding. You angle your spoon with the reverence of someone conducting a séance. You lift it gently, tilt it just enough not to spill, and sip without slurping. You are a ghost sipping moonlight. Nothing more. Someone across the table coughs. A woman to your left flinches as though struck. The widow next to you presses her lips together in visible moral discomfort. You keep sipping. At no point may you blow on the soup. Blowing suggests a failure in timing. If your soup is too hot, you must simply wait. You may not fan it. You may not talk to it. You must suffer in silence, your face unchanging as your tongue scolds beneath your composure. You dare not reach for anything without observing which fork Lady Thistlebalm uses. You watch her hands like a hawk. She's a professional. She could gut a pheasant with a butter knife and no one would question it. She lifts a spoon. You do the same. You are a reflection, a well-dressed echo. The napkin remains untouched. It lies across your lap like a trap. You itch to use it. Your lip has been slicked by soup. But the timing is not right. Someone is watching. You can feel it. Possibly the maid with the tray of wine. Possibly God. You wait. The rector has realized his error. Slowly, with the tragic resolve of a man accepting defeat, he untucks the napkin and drapes it over his knees. It is too late. The damage is done. The widow leans slightly away from him, the weight of her bird skull shifting ominously in her handbag. You take another sip of soup. You're not hungry. No one here is hungry. Hunger would be human. You're here to perform the act of consumption without revealing need. It is all theatre. A choreographed ballet of clinks, nods, and restrained digestion. The napkin will remain in place until dessert, maybe longer. You are unsure. The rules change, but you're not allowed to ask. You are simply to observe, adapt, and survive. You breathe through your nose. You keep your chin level. You avoid looking at the jelly mold trembling on the sideboard like a witness. The napkin has not moved. You have passed the first test, for now. The second course arrives with quiet fanfare. A footman slides a plate in front of you with the solemn grace of someone delivering a verdict. It holds filet of sole à la Normande. That is to say, delicate white fish smothered in a cream sauce so rich it probably owns property. Around the edges, a wreath of shellfish, mushrooms, and a border of piped mashed potato, like a frosting for someone who's been very well behaved. The fish is moist, the sauce is glossy. It smells like luxury and silent suffering. You stare at it the way one might stare at a love letter in a foreign language. You know it's meaningful, but you're afraid of misreading it. Conversation is technically permitted now, but nobody seems eager to risk it. The room hums with clinks, careful breathing, and the sound of 24 people pretending not to judge each other's cutlery choices. You glance at your utensils. There is a fish knife. It has a gently curved edge and a flat, vaguely threatening personality. You hesitate, then select it, pairing it with the delicate fork that matches. You move like someone trying not to activate a curse. You cut into the fish. It yields without resistance. The sauce gathers politely around the incision. You lift a bite to your mouth. It is warm, buttery, complex. There's a hint of brandy, possibly sherry, possibly despair. You chew with reverence. You swallow with hope. To your left, the rector has chosen the wrong knife. He's attacking the fish like it owes him tithes. The blade slips, slicing the soul into a sad little pile of ruin. His face is turning pink. You can see his soul trying to leave through his collar. You look away to spare him, or to spare yourself. To your right, the widow is thriving. She handles her knife like it's a fencing foil. Her fish is vanishing in elegant bite-sized portions. Her eyes never leave her plate. You wonder if she was trained for this, perhaps by nuns or fencing instructors. Lady Thistlebem still has not eaten. She's engaged in an ongoing conversation with a gentleman whose title includes the word rear, and whose moustache is shaped like an exclamation point. She laughs softly at something he says. The entire table freezes to evaluate the sound. When she finally takes her first bite, it is like a blessing. Forks lower, chewing resumes. You try one of the shrimp. It is perfectly poached and tastes faintly of the sea, the sauce, and a distant fear that you might be doing this wrong. The mushrooms are tiny and delicate, and seem to have been sautéed in both butter and childhood trauma. You try to eat slowly, thoughtfully. It's not about enjoyment. It's about pace, control, survival. Someone sneezes. The table stiffens. A butler materializes from the ether to remove the contaminated napkin and replace it with a fresh one, as if resetting a crime scene. The sneezer mouths an apology. It is accepted with a single glance from Lady Thistlebom. The orchestra plays something polite, possibly waltz, possibly warning. You shift slightly in your chair. One of your knees has gone numb. This is fine. Your body is no longer yours. It belongs to etiquette now. You lift another bite of soul. It slips, lands back on your plate with a nearly audible plop. You die a little. You recover. You do not speak of it. Around the table, the second course proceeds like a ritual. A communion of discomfort. A choreography of chewing, nodding, swallowing, and silently wondering how many more courses remain. You place your knife and fork in the resting position. Angled just right. Not finished. Not ready for removal. Just waiting. Like you. A footman glides by. He nods. Your plate is removed. You survived the fish. Each course brings a new challenge. Which fork? Which glass? Which direction do you pass the jelly? Your neighbour explains the rules in a whisper as if revealing state secrets. One mistake, and you'll be remembered as the fish fork incident forever. The cutlery stretches before you like a glittering riddle. Forks of every shape and mood flank your plate. There is one with tines so narrow it might be used for extracting secrets. Another is short and squat, possibly designed for humiliating peas. There's even a tiny one that looks like it escaped from a dollhouse and now has imposter syndrome. You are meant to work from the outside in. That is the golden rule. Unless a surprise course appears and throws everything into chaos, which happens often, Victorian chefs were known to invent entire dishes just to justify another piece of silverware. You are your soup spoon from earlier, now abandoned like a fallen soldier. You try not to think about him. The jelly arrives in a cut-glass dish that sparkles like it just got promoted. It jiggles with authority. The footman offers it to your left. You freeze. Do you take it first? Pass it? Serve your neighbour? You look to the rector for guidance. He's wiping his forehead with a napkin and appears to be in prayer. The widow offers no help. She's staring straight ahead like someone preparing for impact. You take the jelly. You serve a dignified spoonful onto your plate. You pass it to the right. A subtle nod from the footman confirms you did not just commit social heresy. You survive another moment. Your wine glass is refilled. Again. No one has yet finished a glass, but they are topped up with the regularity of a tide. There is a different wine for each course. You've now tasted 5 types, and remember none. You sip the new one cautiously. It is red. It tastes of oak, plum, and generational pressure. You pretend to enjoy it. Everyone else does the same. A new fork is required. This one is slightly longer, slightly flatter, slightly more judgmental. It is meant for game birds, you believe, or at least for things that once had feathers and opinions. You match it with the correct knife, identifiable only by the engraving of something that might be a pheasant or a lawyer. You make the pairing carefully, like a sommelier of sharp objects. The next dish arrives. You don't even ask what it is. You just begin. You copy Lady Thistlebaum's movements with the subtle attention of a spy. She cuts vertically. You cut vertically. She shifts her fork to the left. So do you. You are her reflection. Her slightly more nervous, slightly shinier reflection. To your left, the rector picks up the wrong knife again. A small audible gasp goes around the table like a passing breeze. He does not notice. The widow sighs through her nose. A butler hovers nearby like a vulture circling formality. The fish knife, the roast fork, the pastry fork, the oyster fork, the mysterious middle-sized fork that might be ceremonial. You make your way through them all with the grace of someone tap dancing through a minefield. Each time you reach for one, your hand hesitates just for a second, like a game show contestant choosing the final answer. Every clang avoided feels like a small miracle. By the time the salad fork arrives, you're nearly in tears, not from emotion, but from focus. This is not dinner. This is chess with cutlery. You take a bite of cucumber that tastes like defeat and move on. There are crumbs on your plate. You dare not brush them. That is the job of the crumb scraper, a man whose sole purpose is to erase your edible mistakes with a tiny metal tool. He approaches. He scrapes. You thank him as if he has saved your life. Because he has. You attempt small talk. Weather is safe. Flowers are safe. Train schedules are acceptable, but only if you do not imply excitement. You mention reading a novel. The widow gasps. Your rector neighbour clutches his brandy glass like a rosary. It is the Victorian dinner party conversational tightrope, and you have already stumbled. You scramble to recover, quickly clarifying that of course it was a moral novel. A cautionary tale, one where someone dies of ambition in chapter 3. The widow's nostrils settle. The rector nods, relieved. You're back in the clear, but only just. Conversation in this room is not a sport. It is a test. There are rules, unwritten, constantly shifting, but absolutely enforced. The topics you may safely address are few and bland. The bloom time of peonies, the consistency of fog, a vague remark about someone else's cough, so long as you immediately assure them it sounded dignified. You try to pivot. Something safe, something dry. You mention that the roads were muddy on the way over. The widow gives a measured hum of agreement. The rector begins describing the condition of the gravel outside his chapel. This is a good sign. You are now wading together in the lukewarm waters of social survival. Then someone mentions politics. A sharp silence falls over the end of the table like a curtain. A marquess with bold sideburns dares to comment on a recent vote. Someone coughs. Another drops a fork. A servant arrives instantly with a new one, but the tension lingers. Lady Thistlebem lifts one eyebrow. The conversation reroutes itself like a carriage avoiding a pothole. Politics, after all, suggests opinion, and opinion leads to judgment. Judgment leads to scandal, and scandal leads to someone having to move to Bath. The rector offers a theological anecdote, which no one listens to but everyone politely nods at. You seize the opportunity to take another bite of fish, anything to avoid comment. The widow beside you begins describing the unfortunate death of her third husband, who passed away while trimming roses. No one asks follow-up questions. You try again. A different guest across the table is discussing a recent concert. This is safe. Music is safe as long as no one implies rhythm. You chime in with a vague compliment about the harpsichord. No one blinks. You have passed. You learn quickly to speak only in the abstract. Never express fondness. Never display enthusiasm. These are signs of lower classes. If you like something too much, it implies need. If you dislike something too much, it implies taste. Either way, you're at risk. Someone across from you mentions a cousin who was seen riding a bicycle. There is a pause. Lady Thistlebam's fingers tighten slightly on her glass. Someone clears their throat. Bicycles are a grey area. They suggest mobility, autonomy, and a disturbing lack of supervision. You smile blandly, take a sip of wine, and pretend not to hear. You notice that the widow has brought the conversation back to funerals. This is her comfort zone. She's describing mourning fabrics with the fervour of a textile historian. Everyone listens respectfully as she explains the distinction between half-mourning lavender and full-mourning jet. You nod. You learn. You begin planning your own emotional exit strategy just in case. You take another sip of brandy and try to make a neutral comment about candlelight. This lands well. Everyone agrees the lighting is atmospheric. No one specifies what emotion the atmosphere contains. You are once again on safe ground. The rector makes a pun. It lands like a goose in a baptismal font. No one laughs. A lady at the end of the table gently changes the subject to asparagus prices. You marvel at her skill. The main course includes something that might once have been pigeon, now suspended in a wobbly mound of aspic. Another jelly. It trembles as you cut it. You tremble as you chew it. Someone sneezes. Everyone pretends nothing happened. The aspic is cold, not cool. Cold. The kind of cold that suggests the dish has only just emerged from the grave. The pigeon, if it is pigeon, is pale, stringy, and flavoured with confusion. Encased in translucent gelatin, it shimmers slightly in the candlelight like something displayed in a curiosity cabinet. You try not to think about Victorian preservation techniques, or pigeons. You glance around the table. Everyone else is pretending this is normal. No one flinches. No one questions why there is meat and jelly. Why there are decorative vegetables floating inside it like a crime scene diorama. Why the parsley garnish has been artfully arranged into what appears to be a sprig of denial. You press your fork gently against the surface. It gives. The jelly quivers. You carve out a modest portion and lift it to your mouth, praying to every known deity for strength, numbness, or at least a distraction. The texture is that of betrayal. Your teeth sink into the pigeon, which tastes faintly of salt, fear, and possibly sage. The aspic is seasoned with vinegar and uncertainty. You chew carefully. You swallow slower. To your left, the rector is powering through his portion like a man trying to impress his ancestors. To your right, the widow is sculpting her aspic into neat geometric cubes before consuming them one by one, like an extremely judgmental robot. You consider following her lead, but lack the precision or emotional detachment. A footman appears with a gravy boat and pours a lukewarm semi-gelatinous sauce over your plate. You nod in what you hope is appreciation. It might be despair. The sauce smells faintly of sherry and something medicinal. It pulls around your pigeon aspic, making it look like it's melting. You're not sure if this is intentional. You're not sure of anything anymore. Conversation has slowed. There is a quiet, strained energy in the air. This is not a course people look forward to. This is a course one survives, like public speaking or dentistry. Someone at the far end of the table mutters something about the texture. They are immediately silenced by a swift glance from Lady Thistlebaum. The footmen continue to circulate, refilling wine glasses in an effort to keep everyone docile. You sip from yours again. It helps. A little. The wine is red, heavy, and full of distracting flavour. You cling to it like a lifeboat made of grapes. Across the table, a gentleman has stopped eating. His aspic remains mostly untouched. A footman hovers nearby, monitoring. You can feel the weight of expectation radiating from every plate. Wasting food is a social misdemeanor. Not being able to finish your jellied meat might mark you as emotionally weak, or worse, nouveau riche. You push forward. Another bite. You try to focus on the craftsmanship, on the precision it must have taken to shape this dish, on the hours it probably spent trembling in a cold pantry, just waiting to cause spiritual damage. This is not food. This is art. Dangerous, gelatinous art. The jelly jiggles again. You realize your hand is shaking slightly. You pause. Take a breath. Pretend to adjust your napkin. The rector is sweating. The widow has vanished another cube. Lady Thistlebaum appears completely composed, though it is possible she has trained herself not to register taste. You take a final bite. You smile faintly. You have done your duty. Your plate is cleared. The jelly is gone, but it will haunt you forever. You've survived 9 courses, 6 forks, 3 wine pairings, and 2 awkward silences. Now comes dessert, a towering structure of custard, cream, and social anxiety. 1 spoonful too fast and you're a glutton. Too slow and you're insipid. Choose wisely. The footman sets the plate before you like he's delivering a sacred artifact. It wobbles slightly, tall and triumphant, crowned with sugared violets and the weight of generational pressure. This is not merely pudding. It is a statement, possibly a threat. You are expected to admire it, not just eat it. You cannot dive in. You must approach it like diplomacy, carefully, indirectly, while pretending not to care. The spoon awaits. The correct one has already been placed to the upper right of your plate. Delicate, engraved, and entirely aware of your weaknesses. You pick it up as if you were born for this moment. You are not hungry. Hunger was 6 courses ago. This is no longer about sustenance. This is the final exam. You take a cautious spoonful of custard. It is rich, cold, and smooth enough to make your molars sigh. There is a faint hint of brandy, some kind of citrus, and something floral you can't identify, but fear may be rose water. Your eyebrows raise involuntarily. You quickly flatten them again. Pleasure is suspicious. The rector has taken a full bite. Bold, reckless. You hear the faint scrape of his spoon against the porcelain and wince. A woman 3 seats down glances up with the sharpness of a governess catching a child chewing with their mouth open. He does not notice. You look away. The widow, on the other hand, has only touched the top layer. She peels it away like a surgeon. You think you see her smile slightly. It is terrifying. Conversation at this point is light and fragile. Nothing of substance must be said. People are drunk in the Victorian way, tight-lipped, oversatiated, and incapable of admitting it. One guest has begun to explain something about his gout. He is gently ignored. A small glass appears beside your dessert plate. It contains a digestive, perhaps brandy, perhaps something French and herbal. You take a sip. It burns like Victorian morality on the way down. Your vision sharpens. Your spine relaxes. You are still upright, still surviving. You return to the pudding. A meringue is involved now. Where did it come from? Was it always part of the architecture? You do not ask. You simply accept its presence, scoop a bite, and carry on. Your hands are steady. Your dignity is fragile but intact. Across the table, a woman has knocked over her spoon. It clatters to the floor like a gunshot in a chapel. The room stills. A footman retrieves it in a single fluid motion and replaces it. No one speaks of it again, but they will. You wonder how long this part lasts. No one wants to be the first to finish. No one wants to be the last. Dessert, like all things in Victorian society, is a game of restraint. You consider pretending to be full. You consider licking the plate. Both are equally dangerous. A guest at the far end compliments the dessert. Lady Thistlebalm accepts this with a gracious nod and a comment about her cook's Hungarian influences. This is code for "I know it was flawless, and I dare you to disagree." The final bite approaches. You delay it, swirling the last of your custard as if in thought. You take a delicate sip of your digestive. You wait until 2 others have finished. Then, with precision, you consume the last spoonful and lay your spoon across the plate at just the right angle. 45 degrees. Daring, but correct. Plates are cleared. Glasses are drained. You sit in the glow of sugar and survival. The dessert is over. Dinner is over, but your trial continues. Back in the drawing room, tea is served and reputations are dissected with surgical politeness. The harpist plays something mournful. You smile through the fatigue and wonder if anyone would notice if you slid under the chaise. The air is thick with lavender and exhaustion. You are no longer hungry, no longer alert, and no longer capable of holding your posture without engaging muscles you forgot existed. But you must still be pleasant, still be charming, still be upright. Teacups clink gently, the sound of porcelain anxiety. You are handed a cup with trembling fingers. It's lukewarm, milky, and barely tea. It tastes like submission. Sugar cubes are passed with tongs and no one uses more than 1. 2 sugars suggest indulgence. 3 suggest moral decline. Honey is unavailable, of course. Honey is rural. Around you, the conversation has shifted. No longer the cautious weather commentary of dinner, it is now veiled gossip, like a play performed for an audience of mirrors. Someone mentions Lady Fotheringay's unfortunate brooch placement. Another murmurs something about a cousin's recent visit to the colonies with the exact tone one might use for a medical emergency. Everyone is very kind, dangerously kind. You nod appropriately, say nothing specific, and sip your tea. The room is filled with faces pretending to relax. People perch on the edge of sofas like porcelain figurines afraid of chipping. The widow has reappeared with her embroidery hoop. You suspect it's just for show, like a prop in a theatrical production about moral superiority. The rector has begun telling a story. You're not sure how it started, but it now involves a goat, a bishop, and a small fire. You listen with half a brain while the other half wonders if you're allowed to blink slowly without being seen as impolite. You shift slightly in your seat. Your corset shifts not at all. You catch snatches of whispered conversation from nearby chairs. Someone is being praised for a very sensible hat. Someone else is being mourned socially for having used the wrong kind of calling card ink. These are the victories and losses of your world. You remind yourself to check the ink colour on yours when you get home, assuming you're ever allowed to leave. You glance round the room. Lady Thistlebaum has taken her preferred spot by the fire. She is speaking to a viscount's wife with the clipped rhythm of someone who is simultaneously conversing and evaluating property value. Occasionally she smiles. It is not encouraging. Someone near the window is playing a slow game of chess, using a set carved from ivory and quiet malice. You watch them for a moment, then look away before they ask if you play. You do not. At least, not well enough to lose with dignity. Your teacup is now empty, but you hold it as a shield. So long as it is in your hand, you have a reason not to gesture, or speak, or exist too vividly. A footman appears and offers to refill it. You allow this. It is something to do. The harpist changes songs. This one is somehow even sadder. You imagine collapsing gently into the carpet and pretending to faint. Not dramatically, just enough to be carried out. You suspect it would be frowned upon. The last guest who fainted had to write a letter of apology, in verse. A man in the corner is trying to flirt with a young woman by complimenting her father's gout. She nods politely and smiles the way someone smiles before entering a duel. Across the room, two women whisper behind fans. They are not talking about the music. They are probably talking about someone's hemline, or marriage prospects, or something that happened 3 seasons ago that still has social consequences. You pretend not to notice. You catch the eye of another guest. You don't know her name. You've never spoken. But for one perfect moment you share the same thought. We have made it this far. We must not break now. You straighten your shoulders. You adjust your gloves. You pretend to laugh softly at something the rector says about Methodist upholstery. The drawing room continues. The harp plays on. You are very tired. You feel it before it happens. A shift in the room. A collective sigh that never reaches the lungs. The drawing room has dulled to murmurs and tea dregs. Someone glances at the clock. A few guests are standing now, hovering awkwardly like ghosts who missed their exit cue. The party is winding down. The end is near, but first comes the exit. You start with the guest nearest to you, offering a soft goodbye that feels both too familiar and not familiar enough. They respond with a platitude about the evening being most pleasant. It is unclear whether this refers to the dinner, the music, or the moment it's now ending. You smile, you nod, you move on. The rector bids you good night by misquoting something vaguely biblical. The widow says she always enjoys your presence, which sounds like a threat wrapped in lace. You thank them both with the emotional range of a painted portrait. You are stopped 3 more times before you even make it to the hallway. One woman insists on telling you the history of her brooch. You listen. You pretend to care. The brooch, apparently, belonged to her second cousin who once met Prince Albert's stablemaster. You make a sound of interest that could be mistaken for indigestion. She beams. The butler intercepts you at the threshold of the foyer like a gatekeeper of endings. He gestures toward the cloakroom. You nod, relieved. Almost free, but not yet. Your cloak is produced with solemn reverence, as though it were a relic or a piece of particularly judgmental taxidermy. A footman helps you into it while avoiding all eye contact. You stand there, arms out, feeling like a scarecrow being slowly reassembled. Lady Thistlebaum descends upon you just as you're fastening your final button. Her presence smells faintly of lavender and critique. She kisses you near, but never on the cheek. Her eyes flick briefly to your shoes. You've failed some invisible test. You don't ask which one. So pleased you could join us, she says. You thank her for the invitation, for the dinner, for not exiling you mid-syllabub. She nods once, regal and terrifying. Somewhere in her mind, a ledger is updated. You curtsy. She nods again. You curtsy slightly again. She blinks. The farewell loop has begun. You back away slowly, smiling like someone being escorted out of a hostage situation with grace. Finally, the door opens. Night air hits you like liberty. You inhale it greedily. Cold, damp, vaguely soot-scented liberty. Your driver helps you into the carriage, and you fall into the seat like a marionette cut from its strings. The door shuts. The wheels turn. You are moving. You are gone. Inside the carriage, silence is sacred. You let it wrap around you. Your back slumps. Your eyebrows relax. You reach under your cloak and unhook one side of your corset, just enough to let a single rib breathe again. It feels like cheating. It feels like self-preservation. You remove one glove, just one. It's symbolic. You survived the seating plan, the jelly, the etiquette acrobatics, the staring, the not staring, the napkin choreography. You gave them everything you had, and now you're going home with your shoes intact and only minor psychological bruising. Outside, the city continues. Gaslight flickers on soot-black bricks. A paper boy yawns. A cat licks a puddle with purpose. No one here knows you accidentally laughed at a joke about meat pies, and if they did, they would probably applaud. You lean your head against the window. The glass is cold. Real. Unconcerned with who you sat next to or how many forks you fumbled. You close your eyes for just a second. You made it out, and you can finally rest. But not for long. Victorian society doesn't let you rest. It simply changes costumes. You barely have time to recover from the dinner party before the next expectation slides into your life like it's perfectly reasonable. A real Victorian ball night is waiting around the corner. The sparkling candlelit finale where the room glows, the music floats, and everyone looks effortlessly elegant. Except you. Internally, because you're about to dance in formal wear while trying not to sweat, trip, or accidentally flirt with the wrong person's fiancé. The invitation arrives by post, with handwriting so elaborate it looks like it was penned by a caffeinated peacock. You unfold the creamy parchment with trembling fingers. Lord and Lady Thistlebaum request the pleasure of your company. A lie, obviously. What they really request is your flawless performance in a multiple-hour ritual involving formal wear, forced laughter, and not once mentioning digestion. You have been summoned, and backing out is not an option. Someone already tried last year. They've never been seen since. The letter smells faintly of lavender and obligation. There's a wax seal, of course, pressed with the Thistlebam crest, which features a swan, a sword, and what appears to be a disapproving eyebrow. You stare at it, wondering how something so small can fill a person with such immediate nausea. You know this isn't just a social event. It's a battlefield wrapped in velvet, and you've just been drafted. The invitation contains all the information you need and none of the information you want. The date, the time, the address. Nothing about the dress code or the guest list. You scan the ornate script, looking for clues, anything that might give you the upper hand. But no, just flourishes, loops, and one aggressively large ampersand. You set it down and immediately regret opening it before breakfast. Now your toast is cold and your tea tastes like fear. You rise slowly from your chair, already calculating how long you have to prepare. 3 days, 72 hours to transform yourself from a relatively coherent adult into a perfectly mannered, impeccably dressed Victorian porcelain doll who does not yawn, sweat, or chew with enthusiasm. You pull out your mental checklist. Gown, gloves, hair, shoes. Hair again, in case the first attempt resembles a startled hedgehog. You'll need to send word to the dressmaker, the hairdresser, the woman who starches your collars into thin blades of judgment. You'll also need to practice smiling in the mirror until it looks less like gas pain. Your aunt is thrilled, naturally. She clutches the invitation like it's an Olympic medal and begins reciting every Thistlebam event she ever attended, including the one where a countess's parrot attacked a bishop. You nod along, smiling weakly, as she suggests you wear the green satin gown with the neckline that implies subtle availability. You're not sure what that means. You're too afraid to ask. By lunchtime, the house is buzzing. A maid is polishing your best shoes until they reflect your anxiety. Someone is mending lace. The cook is quietly judging your appetite. Your cousin has offered to teach you conversational fencing in case someone insults your lineage mid-waltz. You thank him, decline, then reconsider. You try to focus on the practicalities. You write a thank you note in return. That's what everyone does. You labour over every word, trying to strike the right balance between gratitude and nonchalance. You sign it with a flourish that makes your wrist ache. It will be hand-delivered by a boy in a cap who smells like old ink and impatience. He waits silently as you seal it, then scurries off. You spend the evening flipping through etiquette books that all contradict each other. One says to enter the ballroom with confidence. Another says humility is key. A third suggests fainting modestly if conversation becomes too intense. You make a note, just in case. That night you lie in bed wide awake, heart thudding like a slow drum solo. You picture the chandeliers, the music, the layered conversations dripping with subtext. You imagine standing in a sea of lace and judgment, trying to remember if you're supposed to curtsy before or after someone comments on your embroidery. You exhale through your nose. You can do this. Probably. You're going to the ball. Whether you survive is still undecided. It is 5 hours before the ball, and you are deep in the trenches of grooming warfare. You have applied powder, plucked, pinned, perfumed, and prayed. Your hair has been sculpted into an architectural marvel, held together with spit, prayers, and 2 visible forks. One wrong move and it all collapses like a souffle in a thunderstorm. Your dressing room looks like someone lost a fight with a fabric store. Lace trails from chair backs, Ribbons hang from drawer knobs, hairpins glint from every surface like shrapnel. In the corner your maid is steaming your gloves with the solemnity of a priest preparing communion wafers. You sit perfectly still while a second maid uses a curling iron that resembles a medieval torture implement to twist your fringe into obedient spirals. Your gown is waiting on the mannequin, pale blue silk with tiny pearl buttons and the sort of bustle that requires spatial awareness and possibly a permit. You eye it warily. It is beautiful. It is terrifying. It looks like it weighs slightly more than you. Putting it on will require teamwork, upper body strength, and the suspension of disbelief. First comes the petticoat, then the second petticoat, then the third, which crackles when you walk, then the cage crinoline, which makes you feel like a bell about to be rung. You step into the gown like someone boarding a small boat. The fabric sighs around you. Your maid fastens the buttons one by one while whispering encouraging lies about how lovely you look and how everyone adores a strong jawline. Then it is corset time. It is tight, angry, and emotionally manipulative. You grip the bedpost while your maid pulls the laces. You count backward from 10 and try not to confess to crimes. By the time she ties it off, you are 3 inches smaller and capable of hearing colours. Now you are upright, trussed, and shimmering with the kind of fear only experienced by acrobats and people meeting their in-laws for the first time. You reach for your perfume, dabbing a little on your wrists and neck. It smells of jasmine, crushed expectation, and a faint hint of desperation. It is perfect. You inspect your gloves, white kid leather, elbow length. The left one has a tiny crease that suggests you have secrets. You smooth it with the back of a spoon, then immediately drop the spoon into a bowl of hairpins. You pretend this was intentional, a statement. Fashion is performance, after all. A final glance in the mirror confirms that you look acceptable, provided no one sees you in direct sunlight or asks you to breathe too deeply. You practice a smile. It feels like cardboard stretched over doubt. You try a second one. Better. Less haunted. You rehearse polite nods. One for strangers, one for acquaintances, one for people who may be dukes but might also be just rich and confident. The hairdresser returns to deliver the finishing blow, a set of decorative combs with enough pointy edges to arm a small militia. She jabs them into your hairdo with the precision of a surgeon and the tenderness of a street brawler. You wince. She smiles. Beauty is pain, and also pins. Downstairs the carriage is being readied. You hear the clatter of hooves, the clink of harness buckles, the distant rustle of servants placing heated bricks under carriage seats. Your time is almost up. You take one last look at yourself. You look like a society darling. You feel like a tightly packaged soufflé. You gather your fan, your reticule, your composure. It is time. You are dressed. You can't bend at the waist, but you look fantastic. You step into the carriage like a condemned soul boarding a velvet-lined hearse. The air smells of horse sweat, coal smoke, and last week's cabbage. Outside, the gas lamps flicker through the London fog like weary halos. Inside, you clutch your fan like a weapon. Your driver has not spoken since Derby. You bounce over cobblestones, trying not to let your petticoats become intimately acquainted with the floorboards. The ball awaits. Your stomach has filed for emotional support. The carriage lurches forward with the elegance of a startled goat. Each jolt sends your spine into a new philosophical phase. You try to maintain a dignified posture, but every bump in the road threatens to yeet you into a full existential crisis. Your skirts rustle like anxious foliage. You attempt deep breathing, but the corset has reduced your lung capacity to that of a mildly athletic mouse. You glance out the small window. The fog is thick and sulky, draping the city in a murky gloom that makes everything look like it is being viewed through an old bathtub. Chimneys belch smoke into the sky like tired dragons. Somewhere nearby, a street vendor yells about hot pies with the desperation of a man trying to offload cursed artifacts. You press your gloved fingers to your forehead and wonder, for the third time, if you could fake a fever convincingly enough to cancel the evening. Your companion is silence, and the occasional unsettling noise from the horses. The driver coughs once, wetly, like someone trying to dislodge a Victorian ghost from his throat. You consider starting a conversation, but remember he has not acknowledged your existence since 1872. Probably best to leave him to his thoughts and passive loathing. You shift slightly, and the carriage responds by creaking in a way that suggests imminent collapse. A loose hairpin stabs your scalp. You try not to make a sound. Showing discomfort is for amateurs and people without reputations to maintain. You are neither. A flickering street lamp passes, illuminating the interior for just long enough to confirm that your shawl is collecting carriage dust at an alarming rate. You brush it off with your gloved hand, which only smears the dust into a dignified smudge. Perfect. You now resemble a person who has survived something, which, technically, you are doing in real time. Your brain chooses this moment to remind you of every social failure you have ever had at previous events. The time you mistook a bishop for a footman, the time you tried to make a witty remark about weather and accidentally implied the Earl of Devon had a sweating condition, the time your dance card mysteriously remained blank and you pretended to twist your ankle just to escape. You nod grimly to yourself. Character development, probably. Another sharp turn. Your hip collides with the wooden edge of the seat. You clench your jaw so tightly your ancestors feel it. Your reticule slides to the floor with a tragic little thud. You retrieve it, barely, and resecure it in your lap like a frightened squirrel. It contains your fan, a coin, a tiny vial of smelling salts, and all your fragile hope. The wheels hit a pothole with such force that your internal organs briefly rearrange themselves into a different zodiac sign. You inhale sharply, which is a mistake. The carriage now smells like warm velvet, boiled laundry, and the lingering ghost of someone's lunch. You crack the window for air. It opens 2 inches and then sticks, as all windows in history have done since the beginning of time. You close it again and decide to simply marinate. Finally, in the distance, you see the glow of the Thistlebam estate. Gas lamps line the path like judging eyes. A footman already waits by the curb, motionless and terrifying. You sit up straighter. You smooth your dress. You prepare your face. The carriage slows, groaning like an old man confessing to minor tax fraud. You exhale. It is time. The ball is here, and you are still upright. Mostly. The moment your boot touches the stone step, you are on stage. A butler opens the door with the poise of someone who has absolutely seen better people. The floor is checkered black and white like a chessboard where all the pieces are rumours, and you are probably the pawn. Your footsteps echo too loudly. Your gloves feel too tight. Your hemline brushes the marble with a whisper that sounds dangerously like, "Help me." The butler takes your name without blinking. You are not introduced. You are assessed, filed, possibly noted in a leather-bound book kept under Lady Thistlebam's pillow. Your cloak is taken by a maid who smells faintly of lavender and responsibility. She does not speak. She does not need to. Her eyebrow says everything. She glances once at your shoes and nods just enough to suggest you are barely acceptable. This is a win. You hold your head higher, which is a mistake. You make direct eye contact with a massive oil portrait of a former Thistlebam ancestor, who appears to be frowning directly at your neckline. You are led into the receiving hall. The wallpaper is floral in that overcommitted Victorian way that feels less like interior decoration and more like being swallowed by a haunted garden. The gas lamps flicker as if nervous. You try to walk with grace and instead produce the rhythm of someone stepping over invisible cats. Another guest is being welcomed ahead of you. Her laugh rings out like a small bell made of passive aggression. The butler gestures silently. You understand. This is your mark. You're expected to pause, breathe, glide. You attempt all three and manage two. Your gown snags slightly on the corner of a decorative urn. You pretend not to notice. A footman does notice. He blinks once, slowly, like a judge on a baking show. A low murmur rises from nearby rooms. Somewhere, a string quartet is tuning with the urgency of a group that knows their audience will not applaud, but will absolutely write letters if anything sounds French. You adjust your posture, shoulders back, chin neutral, eyes forward but soft. The stance of a woman who is ready for anything except honest conversation. A side table holds a silver tray of calling cards. You are not to touch them. You are to acknowledge them with your peripheral vision and then immediately forget their existence. They are like ghosts or consequences. Decorative, slightly threatening, best ignored. From the grand hallway you hear the rustle of silk and the hush of voices measuring each other's worth in syllables. You spot your reflection in one of the two low mirrors, captures only your torso. You look like a fancy torso with trust issues. You smooth your bodice. Your cameo brooch is slightly askew. You fix it. You fix it again. You regret having been born. You're announced. Your name is spoken by the butler with the same tone one might use to identify a mysterious smell. All heads do not turn, which somehow feels worse. A few eyebrows lift. One monocle shifts slightly. That is enough. You are officially part of the evening. Congratulations, you have entered the gauntlet. A lady in lilac glances at your gloves. A man with sideburns makes brief eye contact and then looks away, as if your presence reminded him of taxes. You float forward, smiling like someone who has recently been told that blinking too much implies moral weakness. You are asked no questions, you are offered no drink, but you are seen, noticed, measured. That is the first hurdle. You are still upright, still breathing shallowly. You take one more step forward and wait for someone to either greet you or devour you whole. Either would be acceptable. The mirrors continue to judge. The marble continues to chill your ankles. More guests arrive. The room is filling. Voices are getting louder, but the volume of actual communication remains extremely low. Everyone is performing. Everyone is terrified. You are performing being unterrified. It is exhausting. You imagine your reflection somewhere behind you is already wilting. A footman appears, nods toward the drawing room. It is time. You are to proceed. Enter the next phase of the evening, the small talk, the tight smiles, the long, slow climb toward the first dance. You take one last breath. Rearrange your face into an expression that suggests confidence, elegance, and absolutely no stomach concerns. You float forward, slowly, carefully, just past the edge of panic. Your name is still in the air, your shoes still slightly squeaky, but you are moving, and that is what matters. The room smells faintly of lemon polish and social performance. Every piece of furniture has carved legs, velvet cushions, and the unmistakable energy of something decorative but exhausted. You drift past a fainting couch that hasn't been fainted on since 1834. A harp sits untouched in the corner, next to a vase so delicate it seems to flinch when someone walks by. You inch toward a cluster of guests already deep in a conversational spiral. A gentleman in a patterned waistcoat is explaining in great detail the pros and cons of gravel versus crushed shell on garden paths. Everyone is nodding like this matters. You nod too, though your mind is busy screaming internally. The gravel man turns to you and asks whether you prefer raked or unraked pebbles. You reply with a straight face that you once slipped on unraked gravel and injured your pride. A few polite chuckles. Success. For now. A woman in peach silk makes eye contact and gives you the universal expression of polite suffering. You respond with the appropriate tight-lipped smile and tilt of the head that says, "I see you, we will not be friends, but I do respect your corsetry." She's quickly drawn back into a conversation. You turn your attention to a side table stacked with tiny sandwiches. You take one. It tastes like anxious butter. Music drifts in from the ballroom, a string quartet tuning or slowly unravelling. Someone has opened a window just slightly, and the London fog seeps in with the arrogance of an uninvited relative. It settles over everything. The candles sputter once in protest. A lady near the fireplace mutters something about draughty houses being excellent for moral fibre. Her husband nods as if he invented both windows and judgment. You are introduced to a baronet who claims to have met the Queen twice. You are not sure whether he means Victoria or some local woman named Edith who runs a particularly firm household. He compliments your gloves. You thank him, even though you suspect he may have meant your hands in general. He chuckles softly and drifts away, leaving behind the faint scent of pomade and upper-class disappointment. You try to make small talk with a young woman in a lavender sash. She informs you, without being asked, that her parrot has recently taken a vow of silence. You express sympathy. She does not respond. You nod and drift away as silently as possible, attempting not to disturb the thick layer of performance settling over the room like dust on piano keys. At one point you find yourself beside a tall plant and use it as conversational cover. From behind the leaves, you overhear a gentleman confess to loving winter because it gives him an excuse to avoid socializing. You feel an instant kinship, which immediately dissolves when he begins discussing coal prices with alarming intensity. The air grows thicker, not physically but socially. You are now in the liminal space between arrival and first dance. No one is quite sure where to stand. Eye contact becomes dangerous. Smiling too much implies desperation. Not smiling implies contempt. You remain at a neutral setting, pleasant, quiet, slightly blurred around the edges. The hostess appears, Lady Thistlebam. She does not walk, she sails. Her gown whispers against the floor like a scandal waiting to be confirmed. Her eyes scan the room, not with curiosity but with inventory. She's not looking for guests. She's reviewing assets. And liabilities. You're still unsure which category you belong to. She makes her way from guest to guest, dispensing compliments that double as warnings. A countess is told she looks very refreshed, which likely means she overdid the rouge. A viscount is praised for arriving exactly on time, which implies he was nearly late. A young debutante is told her dress is very daring. She looks thrilled. She should not be. You make a mental note to remain slightly behind any floral arrangements for the next 10 minutes. Lord Thistlebam drifts quietly behind his wife, occasionally nodding at furniture. His expression suggests he's either very wise or completely hollow inside. Possibly both. He stops beside a footman, says something about fishing, and disappears behind a fern. You will not see him again for the next hour. Lady Thistlebam approaches a trio of duchesses and adjusts her gloves with the precision of a duelist preparing to draw. Her voice is honey dipped in steel. She inquires about their summer estates, their lap dogs, and their gout. Each response is met with the same half smile and a slight tilt of her head that says, "Thank you for confirming my superiority. Your turn comes again." She circles back toward you, eyes narrowing just a fraction, as if reviewing a footnote in her mental ledger. She compliments the stitching on your gloves. You resist the urge to look at them. You nod and say thank you softly, carefully. Her smile tightens. She's trying to decide whether you're clever or merely fortunate. You try not to blink. She introduces you to someone named Lady Featherstone, a woman whose expression suggests she's thinking about death but in a polite way. You exchange pleasantries, offer vague compliments, and mentally brace for an unplanned conversation about seasonal embroidery. Lady Featherstone asks what you thought of last month's music hall. You say it was unforgettable. This is safe, she nods. You both pretend to sip sherry. Lady Thistlebam moves on. You watch her greet a baroness with a laugh so precise it must have been practiced in a mirror. The baroness responds with a compliment about the chandelier. They share a moment of agreement over the superiority of Italian crystal. You nod quietly to no one. It is not that Lady Thistlebam is cruel, it is that she is precise. She believes in symmetry, hierarchy, and conversational pacing. She's a master of the slow cut, the polite burn, the comment that sounds pleasant until you are halfway home and realize you have been socially filleted. She returns to centre, adjusts a sleeve, and glances toward the ballroom doors. The music has shifted. The time is near. She claps once gently, and the sound carries like a soft commandment. Conversations pause, fans lower, glasses still. A maid appears instantly at her side. A butler nods from the hall. She announces that dancing shall begin shortly. The ballroom doors creak open. Inside, 1,000 candles blaze like polite torches. The room stretches out like a temple to anxiety. Every surface gleams with the kind of hostile elegance that makes you feel like you owe it money. Gold trim edges the walls. The ceiling is painted with cherubs, all of whom are judging you. Your eyes adjust to the light just in time to see 3 women glide past in perfect formation, their expression serene, their hemlines unwrinkled, their confidence devastating. You pause in the doorway too long. A footman gently clears his throat, reminding you that you are blocking the path like a well-dressed traffic cone. You move, you squeak. Your soul leaves your body. You pretend nothing happened and continue forward as if you were born to do this and not, say, practicing curtsies with the doorknob 15 minutes ago. The parquet floor beneath your feet looks like it was buffed by monks. Your slippers slip slightly. You adjust your gait to something between floating and bracing for impact. You try to look natural, as though you enter gilded rooms all the time, as though the crystals above your head are not threatening to fall and erase you from history in the most expensive way possible. The music continues, gentle and sinister. The violinist is playing with the precision of someone who knows their performance will be reviewed in 4 different society columns. A gentleman with an alarming moustache nods to the rhythm. You nod too. Why are you nodding? No idea. Panic has taken the wheel and is now attempting charm. Around the edges of the ballroom, guests hover like chandeliers that never got installed. Everyone is waiting. For what? Unclear. Perhaps for Lady Thistlebaum to issue the official first nod. Perhaps for someone to trip so the rest can feel superior. You take a sip of your sherry, which you're fairly certain is 30% wine and 70% social lubricant. A maid glides past, adjusting a single chair. You're not sure what changed, but somehow everything feels more formal. You smooth your gloves. You tuck a stray curl behind your ear. You try to look serene but available, mysterious but open, festive but immune to joy. In other words, like a Victorian woman at a ball. A maid hands you a delicate dance card and a pencil the size of a regret. Your mission: fill the card with partners before you become a cautionary tale. You scan the room. Eligible bachelors glisten like damp wallpaper. You recognize one suitor from last season. He once compared your elbows to those of a well-fed pony. You pencil him in anyway. Desperation is very in this year. The card itself is a tiny folded piece of cardstock, embossed with gold filigree and the unmistakable air of judgment. Each line is a slot for a different dance, and each dance is a test. Not just of your posture and your memory, but of your ability to make polite conversation while being twirled by someone who smells like boiled wool and ambition. You hold the card like it might bite, which it could, spiritually. The pencil is laughably small, as if designed to remind you that you have no control here. You attempt to write your name legibly in the designated corner. Your hand is already trembling. The last time you felt this nervous holding a writing implement, you were forging your mother's signature to get out of embroidery lessons. You scan the room again. The first wave of partners is already circling. You need names, allies, bodies with rhythm. You spot the Earl of Glenshire's second son. You've danced with him before. He once sneezed mid-spin and nearly flung you into a centrepiece. But he is here. He is upright. You nod politely in his direction. He nods back and begins the slow shuffle toward you. You're intercepted by a woman in a seafoam gown and an expression like she just smelled treason. She's inquiring whether you have the quadrille open. You lie and say you do not. She nods with understanding and possibly resentment. You both turn and pretend to look at the curtains. Your card begins to fill. A few safe bets. A man with visible knees in his trousers, which you choose not to investigate further. A cousin of a duke who is said to have once danced so forcefully he cracked a floorboard. And of course your fullback suitor, Mr. Percy. His conversation is duller than cold soup, but he knows the steps and has never once commented on your posture. You try to balance the card. Too many dances with the same person, and people talk. Too few, and people also talk. The goal is variety with a dash of strategy. Avoid the man who wears gloves 2 sizes too small. Avoid the cousin who might actually be your cousin. Avoid the one who hums during the waltz. Always. You're approached by a gentleman with sideburns so aggressive they appear to have independent thoughts. He bows. You curtsy. He asks for the second reel. You agree before remembering that the second reel is notoriously fast and you have not reeled since that unfortunate incident with the spilled punch and a broken brooch. Too late now. He smiles and writes his name. You do not catch it. You will find out mid-spin. The room is loud with rustling silk and social calculus. You see some girls comparing dance cards in a corner. One is whispering about the tragic implications of a blank sixth slot. You glance at yours. The sixth slot is still open. You feel the pressure of 1,000 candle flames staring directly into your soul. A young man in an ill-fitting waistcoat approaches. You have never seen him before. He looks eager and slightly winded. He asks for your sixth dance. You pause. He stares. You say yes. He beams. You have just signed up for a mystery experience. That is fine. That is Victorian courage. Your card is full now. You look down at the names, a collection of titles, half-remembered cousins, and men whose conversational topics include weather, dogs, and the relative merits of boiled meats. Perfect. You tuck the card into your glove and take a steadying breath. The music is changing. The first dance is about to start. Your dance card is matched. A name is spoken. A hand is offered. You glance down to confirm. Yes, this is the one. The man who signed your second slot with handwriting that looked vaguely threatening, Mr. Everly, or possibly Emery. It was hard to tell. He was out of breath and smelled like boiled wool. Now here he is, standing before you, smiling with confidence he may not have earned, ready to escort you onto the ballroom floor as if this was not a joint performance of mutual survival. You place your gloved hand in his and brace yourself for impact. He leads you toward the center of the room with the energy of someone who has definitely rehearsed this with a coat rack. As you walk, he lists his mother's foot conditions in impressive detail. Corns, bunions, something called a lopsided toe. You nod along, trying to look invested in the plight of a woman you have never met while simultaneously counting the number of steps it will take to reach the floor without tripping over your own hem. He steps on your toes 3 times before the music even begins. You offer a smile that says, "Please stop," but with social grace. The quartet starts the waltz, a slow, elegant rise of strings. Your heart sinks. This is not your tempo. This is the tempo of people who practice. You spin. You stumble. You pretend the dizziness is part of the charm. Your hairpin loosens. Your soul escapes briefly. His grip tightens. He holds your hand like he is trying to summon information from your bones. His other hand rests firmly in the small of your back. Firmly, almost inquisitively. You attempt not to panic. Around you, couples glide like professional ghosts. You do not glide. You dodge. You try to follow the rhythm, but it is slippery. Every time you think you have caught it, it shifts. Is this the beat? Or is that just your corset humming in protest? Every step is a negotiation between your feet and gravity. Your partner begins to hum along, off-key and with surprising volume. You wonder briefly if he is hearing the same music. He attempts a turn. You attempt survival. His idea of spinning involves lifting your arm to eyebrow height and flinging you in a direction not yet agreed upon. Your skirts puff out like a startled souffle. You regain balance by grabbing his forearm with the poise of someone hanging off a balcony. He chuckles and mentions how slippery the floor is tonight. It is not. You nod anyway. Your eyes sweep the room in search of someone worse off than you. A mercy pairing, a fallen glove, a public stumble, anything, but no. The ballroom is a nightmare of perfect posture. You catch the eye of another woman mid-spin. Her expression is vacant. Her mouth is a line. She has left her body. She mouths something. It might be a help. You glance toward Lady Thistlebam. She is watching. Of course. She observes the dance floor like a queen surveying a battlefield. Her eyes are sharp, her jaw is still. You straighten your spine, you lift your chin. You attempt a smile that says, "I am thriving," even as your partner accidentally twirls you into a curtain. He begins a monologue about window taxes. You hum politely, trying to gauge if that sound means yes or "please do not speak ever again." You land one perfect step, just one. You celebrate it internally like a small holiday. He does not notice. He is mid-anecdote about how his uncle died at a picnic. The music slows, the end approaches. You hold your position. You are sore in places you forgot you had. He tells you you are light on your feet. You are not. You are a trembling pile of lace held together by starch and prayer. The music stops. You curtsy. He bows. You separate. By hour 2, the room is an overheated carousel of opinions and lace. The air is no longer breathable in the traditional sense. It is a heady mix of rose oil, starch, perfume, and fear. You fan yourself with one hand and support your spine with the other, which has begun to question its loyalty. The chandeliers continue to drip light and judgment from above, while the floor pulses with the shuffling of 100 shoes too tight for joy. The orchestra has shifted into its mid-evening selections. This is the part of the ball where things begin to blur. The dances are faster, the bows are deeper, and the topics of conversation somehow become both more frivolous and more dangerous. A viscount makes a risky remark about cricket. A widow counters with a blistering comment about horse racing and reputations. You nod along, pretending to understand the sport or the subtext. You sidestep a young lady mid-swoon and nearly collide with a tray of petit fours. You apologize to the pastries. They forgive you. You take one and immediately regret it. It tastes like sugared wallpaper. The icing sticks to your gloves. You now smell faintly of almond despair. Near the fireplace, 3 ladies are whispering behind fans. You catch the phrases dramatic entrance and velvet hem and think you may be the subject or the witness. It is difficult to say. Everyone is whispering. Everyone is watching. No one blinks. The fans flick open and shut with all the subtlety of semaphore signals. The gentleman you danced with earlier passes by and offers a weary smile. His cravat is wilted. His hair has begun to unravel like a story with too many footnotes. You consider saying something but cannot think of a sentence that includes both asparagus tariffs and your deep existential exhaustion. So you just smile and nod. Again. Your feet are no longer feet. They are soft boxes of regret wrapped in satin. You contemplate sitting. The chairs are decorative. The sofas are museum pieces. The only chair available is occupied by a woman telling the story of how her cousin's corset once exploded during a polka. No one moves. No one breathes. You remain standing. The gossip intensifies. Someone brings up Lady Farthingale's 4th engagement. Someone else mentions a footman who was seen carrying 2 cloaks and 1 blush. A third person mutters something about cheese knives and betrayal. You cannot follow. You do not care. You pretend to be fascinated. You retreat briefly to a quieter corner of the room, where 2 older gentlemen are engaged in a heated debate about chimney maintenance. You let their voices wash over you like a warm bath of absolute irrelevance. For 5 minutes, you are safe. Then a debutante bursts in and announces someone has torn their hem during a gallop. You're uncertain if this is about dancing or horses. A woman beside you adjusts her hair and accidentally unpins half her head. She calmly reassembles herself with the help of a mirror and a glare that could flatten cake. You take this as a sign of resilience. You check your own reflection and discover you are still technically presentable if you do not move or speak. Another waltz begins. You pretend not to hear it. You feign deep interest in a nearby statue of a Roman god who looks equally bored. A footman offers more punch. You decline. The last time you accepted, you spilled half of it on your dance card and were forced to invent two imaginary suitors named Alphonse and Gregory. You glance at the clock. It is both too early to leave and too late to have fun. The perfect midpoint of a Victorian ball. You straighten your gloves, lift your chin, and prepare to enter the fray once more. The gossip is circling. The dances continue, the lace is multiplying. You're still here, for now. It happens in slow motion. A dance ends with the usual light applause, the kind that suggests no one died mid-reel, and guests begin drifting toward the punch bowl, or engaging in careful, calculated laughter. The pianist begins a soft interlude, and then fate, draped in velvet and hubris, intervenes. Lady Honoria, vision in chartreuse and poor judgment, attempts to cross the marble floor with the confidence of a woman who has never once considered consequences. Her gown, an ambitious cascade of ruffles, bows, and mystery fabric, stretches behind her like the tail of a startled comet. It is one ruffle too many. Her hem, a frilly beast with no regard for etiquette, catches the ornamental paw of a nearby candlestick shaped like a cherub who looks like he regrets everything. The snag is immediate and catastrophic. The candlestick teeters with theatrical slowness, drawing attention from all sides. A nearby gentleman, unaware that he is about to become part of history, chooses this exact moment to demonstrate a new turn he read about in a magazine. His foot collides with the base. He topples. The candlestick wobbles once, then twice, then falls with a clatter that might as well have been cannon fire. Lady Honoria lets out a sound that defies transcription. Part shriek, part opera note, part startled goose. The back of her gown rips with the terrible finality of an envelope containing bad news. Gasps rise like smoke. The pianist stops playing. Eyebrows ascend. A monocle disengages from its host and shatters on impact. Somewhere, a woman drops her teacup in shock and quietly mutters a prayer. You are frozen. Too close to be innocent, too motionless to be helpful. You make eye contact with the scandal. The scandal blinks first. The back of Lady Honoria's dress has indeed torn, not completely, but enough. Enough to reveal a shocking amount of shoulder and one rebellious strap of chemise. You hear someone mutter the word clavicle like it's a swear. 3 maiden aunts go down like dominoes. One lands squarely in a dish of candied almonds. Another disappears into the drapery. The third simply vanishes, possibly out of the physical plane. A hissing wave of commentary sweeps the room. Guests lean in toward one another, fans fluttering like frantic moths. A countess makes the sign of the cross using her sherry glass. A bishop stares very hard at the ceiling. 2 debutantes whisper furiously about whether the chemise was French. You're approached by a woman in mauve who pretends to ask the time while scanning you for scandal residue. You reply that it's half past social annihilation. She does not laugh. She nods slowly, as if confirming the end times. The fallen gentleman has not yet recovered. He appears to be communing with the floor. His cravat is askew. His wig is grieving. You consider helping him, but remember that aiding the fallen might count as collusion. Lady Thistlebaum arrives, gliding like doom with pearls. She surveys the scene with as quiet efficiency of someone who has seen worse, and already written about it. She says nothing. She doesn't need to. Her silence enters the historical record. Someone suggests it was planned, that the hem was sabotaged, that Lady Honoria wanted out of her engagement and this was her escape plan. Someone else suggests witchcraft. Someone else blames the cherub. Theories multiply like anxious rabbits. Lady Honoria is spirited away by 3 maids, 2 fans, and a bottle of brandy. She leaves behind a single glove and the enduring scent of lemon balm and humiliation. Whether she returns in a different dress or moves to the countryside forever is yet unknown. You, however, remain. You are now a witness, an accessory to fashion-related collapse. People glance at you with that peculiar mix of sympathy and intrigue usually reserved for people who survive duels or accidentally touch royalty. Someone leans in to ask if you saw the moment the thread gave way. You blink slowly. You say nothing. The final quadrille is announced. You're paired with a man who smells like shoe polish and regret. He is the kind of partner who greets you by clearing his throat for a full 7 seconds before offering his arm. You take it. You must. The dance card has rules, and social expectation is a steel trap wrapped in velvet. He does not speak, which is almost a kindness. You do not have the energy for a conversation about tariffs, beetroot, or his latest medical procedure involving something called a salve. The floor beneath you is a battlefield. It has absorbed hours of perspiration, champagne, spilled punch, and emotional damage. It is faintly sticky and treacherous. You can hear your shoes making a soft, regretful noise with every step. Each one sounds like a tiny sigh from the universe. The music begins, something chipper and cruel. The quadrille is not a forgiving dance. It demands rhythm, posture, alertness, and 2 knees that are still speaking to you. Yours are threatening litigation. You smile through it, the way one smiles through bad poetry and long dental procedures. Your partner counts under his breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It helps until it doesn't. He misses a turn and blames the lighting, then the floor, then the string quartet. You nod sympathetically and wonder if you can blame him for your life choices too. You are trying not to notice many things now. The stain on your glove, the fact that your earring has gone rogue, the sensation that your corset is slowly digesting your spine. You spot a piece of confetti on the floor. You don't remember confetti being part of the evening. You don't question it. The couple next to you is whisper fighting while bowing. You catch the words cousin and asparagus and decide to leave that puzzle untouched. Another dancer narrowly avoids stepping on your hem by executing a flourish that nearly decapitates a candle. No one flinches. You're all too tired to fear fire now. Your hair, once a glorious architectural feat of curls and pins, is now drooping with the quiet shame of a souffle caught swearing in church. A single curl dangles over your eye, swinging with every twirl like a tiny judgmental pendulum. You leave it there. It is now part of your personality. Your partner attempts small talk, something about weather. You nod. Then something about a turkey-related incident at his aunt's christening. You nod again. Then he says something completely indecipherable. But you laugh anyway, too loudly, in the tone of a person slowly being devoured by a chaise longue. You execute the final set of steps with something that vaguely resembles grace. Your arms remember where they go. Your feet follow. You twirl. The chandelier above you spins slightly in solidarity. The room tilts. It might be dizziness or enlightenment. You are mostly powdered silk and willpower at this point. The music slows. The final bow approaches. You hold your position. He holds his, you curtsy, he bows. For a moment everything freezes in a perfect trembling tableau. Then the applause, light, polite, almost surprised, but enough to confirm that the ritual is complete. You did it. You did not fall, faint, or shout. These are victories, real ones. He releases your hand with a nod. You nod back. There is no need for words. You have shared a moment, a dance, an unspoken agreement never to acknowledge any of this again. You part ways like retired gladiators, knowing you will never speak again unless stranded in a carriage during a snowstorm. You drift toward the edge of the ballroom, weaving past discarded gloves, exhausted expressions, and one woman silently removing a crinoline with the rage of a trapped bat. A maid offers you water. You accept it with the reverence of someone being handed the Holy Grail. It tastes like dust, cucumber, and salvation. You thank her. She nods in the universal language of women who have witnessed things. The ballroom is softer now. The music is gone. The candles are low. People shuffle toward the cloakroom in slow, uneven waves, dazed and deflated. The air smells like roses, sweat, resignation, and meringue. You gather your cloak, your fan, and what's left of your dignity. The hallway outside the ballroom is a corridor of human wreckage. Guests murmur polite goodbyes with the brittle energy of porcelain dolls. Gloves are mismatched. Hairpins lie in ambush on the floor. One gentleman is being propped up by a footman, and what appears to be a very stern cousin. You nod at no one in particular, and focus on keeping your ankles parallel and your expression pleasant. A maid hands you your cloak and offers you a look of quiet solidarity. You drape it over your shoulders with a flourish that would be more impressive if you were not trembling slightly from fatigue and a mild sugar crash. Your fan is retrieved. You're reunited with your dignity in the form of a half-crushed reticule and the ability to nod without weeping. Lady Thistlebam stands like a sentinel near the door, velvet and victory radiating from her in waves. She says something like delightful to have you and thank you for your charming company. It is unclear if she means it, or if it is simply the script she recites each time she releases a guest back into the wild. You smile, you thank her, you manage not to trip on the carpet. This is growth. The butler, carved from the finest judgmental granite, opens the front door. The air outside is crisp, bracing, and blessedly real. It smells of coal smoke, damp stone, and salvation. You take a step forward and feel the wooden door shut gently behind you, like a book closing on a particularly harrowing chapter. Your carriage is waiting. The horses snort steam into the night. You lurch toward it like a woman fleeing a very polite crime scene. The driver nods, wordless as ever. You climb in, limbs protesting with the stiffness of someone twice your age. As you settle onto the squashed velvet seat, the weight of the evening collapses in around you like a badly made soufflé. The door shuts, the noise of the party disappears. You are wrapped in silence, shadows, and the warm, musky smell of damp wool and stale pastries. It is beautiful. It is peace. You inhale deeply and unlace your gloves with the care of someone disarming a very elegant bomb. The corset loosens, not enough to fully breathe, but enough to remember you have lungs. Your spine makes a sound. You're not concerned. You stretch your toes and feel your stockings cling to the sticky imprint of ballroom tile. You peel off one shoe, then the other, with all the dignity of a drunken eel. It is heavenly. You lean your head against the wall of the carriage. Outside, the fog has returned. wrapping the world in soft smudges and blurred edges. Gas lamps flicker like fireflies. A stray cat watches you from the curb with mild disdain. You nod in respect. The carriage rattles forward. Each jolt sends a ripple of exhaustion through your body, as if your muscles are slowly detangling themselves from the trauma of polite conversation and excessive lace. You close your eyes, not to sleep, just to rest your gaze from chandeliers and powdered faces. You replay moments from the evening, the scandal, the dance, the waltz with the man who knew all 17-foot conditions of his aunt, the quiet war between asparagus and propriety. You survived them all, and now, wrapped in your cloak, barefoot and feral in your heart, you are going home. You have no plans to attend another ball anytime soon, or ever. But you will remember this one, not fondly, not bitterly, just with the hazy awe of someone who has walked through fire and come out slightly sweatier. The carriage bumps along. You exhale. The night sky opens above you, vast and quiet and mercifully chandelier-free. You have survived the evening, and soon you'll settle for a warm bed and a deep, well-deserved sleep.